field is actually it's a softball baseball field, and a lot of times the T.C. Williams High School teams will play there. We see a few sports bags, equipment all over the infield. It's been left there abandoned. There's a lot of activity around the basketball court. Lots of cops there, lots of folks on their phones. Really just a lot of heavy police presence. There was a chopper flying over the field for several minutes, and now the cops are telling us to move.
Where are they moving you, George?
They're moving us right now to a staging area over on Mount Vernon and Monroe. This is a real kind of very quiet residential neighborhood, lots of families, young children. There were a couple schools already in lockdown by the time I got here. Again, cops are really they just keep putting more and more yellow tape all around this field. Right now, police aren't talking to us right now. We're trying to get more information.
Yeah, a little more on the neighborhood. I just got an email from someone who lives near the neighborhood as well, saying hardly anything bad ever happens in Delray. This is just a quiet community, not expecting anything like this.
No, not at all, George. And in fact, there's a very popular coffee place right across the street. We've been trying to get to some of those customers who were probably in there when the shooting happened. But again, this is something where I was dropping off my son at school, and he just came running out of the school saying we're in lockdown, and I had to give my kid away and then run over here to see what was going on. So we're just trying to get some more details here.
Okay, gather some more details as much as you can. I want to go back to Pierre Thomas, our senior justice correspondent, and you're getting more information coming in, Pierre?
Yes, George, just talked to a law enforcement official who confirmed much of what the senator was telling you, that 2 members of a security detail responded to the suspect. There were multiple gunshots fired. The suspect is in custody, according to this source, has been taken to GW Hospital because the suspect was injured, according to this source. Again, the suspect taken to GW Hospital. And again, we're being told multiple shots fired, but they are feeling some level of relief because they believe that they have one suspect in custody. He was injured and has been taken to GW Hospital.
Anything more on the condition of the other shot, Pierre?
Again, the information is that the 2 law enforcement officers were wounded. This source did not have any information that was life-threatening, although the source said one person was flown by MedStar. We saw that helicopter, which generally indicates some sort of severe injury.
Okay, and Pierre Thomas, thanks very much. Want to go now? We have one eyewitness who was on the scene. Let's hear what that person had to say.
That it was a guy hiding in the bushes and he shot. It was at least, they said, about 50 shots. It was a semi-automatic rifle, and like 5 people were shot. That's all I heard.
You work at the Y that's right next to where this baseball field is. And can you tell me what this community is like? This is an unusual circumstance here.
Very unusual. It's a great community, no problems. It's very quiet around here, it's great people. So it's just crazy to hear something like that happen.
I want to go back to Cecilia Vega at the White House. Cecilia, we're getting some information coming in from John Carl as well. Our John Carl saying a member of the leadership is telling him that 1 staffer and 1 lobbyist also shot, confirming the 5 people down.
And John is also reporting, George, that a senior member of GOP leadership is telling him that Scalise and members of his security detail, as we know, were hit. They say that Scalise was hit in the hip and should be okay. Of course, we saw those images of him right there on that stretcher after this incident. So some of the details that we do know at this point, we've heard from others that were on that scene. 5 people were shot. We're hearing between 50 to 60, possibly as many as 100 shots fired out there this morning. Security being upped around the White House and the Capitol right now. As we know, that suspect from Alexandria police is in custody, as Pierre just reported, being treated at the hospital. The details from what happened at that baseball diamond, just absolutely stunning. The security detail that opened fire on a shooter who was inside the dugout with what we're being told was a semi-automatic weapon. Senator Rand Paul crediting that security detail for saving their lives. That story of congressmen running for their lives from that baseball diamond, running to save and help Steve Scalise, Representative Steve Scalise, tying a tourniquet for him, and they just say they would not be alive right now had it not been for that security detail, George.
He said it would have been a massacre. Okay, Cecilia, thanks very much. I want to bring in Ray Kelly on the phone as well, former chief of police, obviously, at New York City. And Ray, you know, we've talked about this so many times before. We don't know anything about motive right now. All we know so far is that this was a single shooter, likely a white male in a blue shirt. But this is the kind of thing that we've been so concerned about. A single person can't be stopped.
You're right, absolutely. Particularly someone who obviously is willing to give his life. Security detail was right there. They acted. The individual is still alive, and we'll get the motive. We'll be able to execute warrants and go to his house, look at his computer work, that sort of thing. But you're right, George. Somebody willing to sacrifice their life, it's very, very hard to stop. Apparently, this game was, or the practice was fairly well known in the area. So,
Ray, let me interrupt you for a second there, because we have Senator Jeff Flake, who is on the scene, is speaking now.
I just batted and then just fields and balls in center field.
I need.
And was standing near Joe Barton watching some batting practice. And all of a sudden we heard a shot, a very loud shot that everybody thought sounded like a gun. And then boom, rapid succession after that. He had a rifle of some type. And it was obviously a large gauge rifle. And there were people in the field. One staffer was shot out in the field. And he ran with a wound to the dugout. A lot of us dove into the dugout and tried to get as many as we could. But then at that point, there was firing behind us from the security detail, the Capitol Police. And I started yelling back, "Are you friendly? Are you friendly?" Making sure that was our guy. Because we didn't know if there were other shooters that had us surrounded and come into the dugout. So we didn't know whether to run or not, but as soon as we found out we had a friendly behind us, then we stayed, tried to keep down. I poked my head at one point and saw the shooter behind the backstop, or behind the fence, but he still had a line of fire into the dugout.
Firing through the fence?
Well, he was firing around, but he still could have fired into the dugout. That's why he kept everybody down. Joe Barton's boy was here, 10-year-old, just shagging balls, and we got him into the dugout and stuffed him under the bench.
And Joe Barton is who, sir?
Joe Barton is a congressman from Texas.
Did this appear to be a coordinated attack?
Well, it looks like only one shooter. You've got to assume he knew what he was doing here. Whether he was targeting certain members, we don't know.
How long until he was down?
It was at least 10. It seemed like a lot longer, I could tell you, but it was at least 10 minutes.
Senator, did you realize that there were Capitol Police officers armed with you here?
Yes.
You knew ahead of time. So.
We did. Steve Scalise is a member of the leadership team. He's the whip, and so he has a security detail. Two of his detail were shot. One African-American gentleman shot in the leg, and I believe he's the one that brought the shooter down. He ran around for quite a while with a leg wound. Returning fire, and then after I got out I was the first out to Steve, and then Brad, another member from Ohio, who's a physician, came out, and we applied pressure on the wound.
And he seems okay to you?
Yeah, he was coherent the whole time, but boy, he laid out there for at least 10 minutes alone in the field, and we couldn't get to him while there were shots.
Which one?
It's right here.
Exactly here.
Did the shooter say anything?
Not that there was a lot of yelling going on, but to tell you the truth, some of the other members had different angles, so they may have heard him yell something, but I didn't. But the two security detail, I think the woman was Crystal, is her name, was shot I think pretty early, and she went down, and so the other gentleman was returning fire.
So it's a female police officer?
Female, Capitol Police officer. She's wounded. She was taken airlifted.
We heard someone was maybe shot in the head. Is that right?
No, there was I think a gentleman by the name of Matt was shot in the chest, and so he was taken, I think, by ambulance.
And just what do you make of this?
What do you make of it? You have no idea. You have no idea. But I got Steve Scalise's phone and called his wife, and I just didn't want her to wake up and hear the news and not knowing what was going on. So I talked to him.
Senator, what specific members do you remember being in the dugout with you?
Chuck Flashman, Marty, the photographer, was there. I think Mo Brooks came in. During that time, you'd see more and more pile in. I think there were about 12, some staff, some members, maybe 6, 8 members in the dugout. But like I said, there were people hiding behind trees. There's a dog park over there, and I think there are always people over there, so I think they were running the other direction.
You said 10 minutes to get the gunman down, but you had security details. What took so long?
He had a lot of ammo, and I think he must have been secured behind the third base dugout for a while, so it was tough to get to him.
He took a tactical standpoint.
It seems so. Initially, he was right out in the open. Marty, our photographer, saw him raise the gun for the first time, the rifle. But he said he thought, why in the world is somebody bird hunting out here at this time? Just, I looked like 40s, maybe 50.
White?
Dark hair, white, with a blue shirt on, I think jeans. My view of him was just quick behind the dugout, and then when I realized he had a line of sight into the dugout with all the members there, then we obviously went back down quickly.
And there were reports of 50 to 100 gunshots. Obviously, that was because Capitol Police were returning fire.
That 50 would be an understatement, I'm quite sure.
Senator, we're now being joined by a national audience. Can you recap exactly what you saw?
Well, we were doing batting practice, and there are a number of members and staff fielding. Steve Scalise was on second base, playing second base, fielding balls, and all of a sudden we heard a very loud shot. Everybody thought that sounds like a gun, and the gunman was over by the third base dugout with a clear view of the field.
Okay, so you have been hearing from
We're going to keep an eye there on Senator Jeff Flake, but in the meantime, we're getting more details coming in right now. I want to go to Brad Garrett as well. Pretty chilling scene described there by the senator. More than 50 shots, 50 to 100 shots. A male, ages in late 40s, 50s, securing himself behind the dugout and going, shooting for up to 10 minutes while members of Congress running for cover, including their kids. This was a person who came prepared to kill.
Well, he may have become prepared, George, but he's not very good. I mean, the idea that you could take a version of an AR-15, shoot 50 to 100 rounds, and it doesn't sound like, based on what you and I know at this moment, that you have fatalities. You have people shot. Now, you have 2 police officers, probably with semi-automatic handguns, return fire. It sounds like to me they must have hit him at some point that either altered his ability to shoot accurately or shoot to continue shooting. So, the suggestion here is, yes, he went and did what he, I guess, wanted to do. However, wasn't particularly precise or accurate or maybe even driven.
And from this description from Senator Flake, unlike some other situations we've dealt with in the past, this was not a shooter who appears to have tried to protect himself. Anyway, he went behind the dugout, but wasn't wearing any kind of a protective vest, helmet, anything like that.
No, this clearly, George, sounds like a guy who got fired up yesterday, last night about something, and maybe he's angry at the GOP for whatever. So he picked an easy location where there would be minimal security, and that anybody could drive up, pick a gun out of the trunk of their car, and start shooting. So I want to also point out one other thing, George. This is another example of soft targets, where the reality is congressmen, like the rest of us, travel around. They have security details. However, these things are almost completely impossible to defense against unless, obviously, you know in advance.
That's right. Okay, Brad Garrett, thank you. I want to go back to Pierre Thomas, as well as senior justice correspondent. Pierre, senior law enforcement officials say so far no indication of a connection to terrorism?
That's correct, George. We're getting early indications, no nexus to terrorism, but I was just on the phone with a senior law enforcement official who said, again, it's way too early to make any final conclusion, but that is the early look that they have. They are beginning to do a background check on the suspect. They will look at his computers. They will try to find out who he's been in communication with. That will take some time, but again, the early indication, no nexus to terrorism, but a law enforcement official said they're just beginning to dig into this man's background.
Back to Cecilia Vega at the White House.
George, the president has just sent out a tweet. He says that Representative Steve Scalise of Louisiana, a true friend and patriot, was badly injured but will fully recover. Our thoughts and prayers are with him. We know that the White House is actively, closely monitoring this situation. The vice president is scheduled, we don't know if this is supposed to still happen, to speak at an event away from the White House. In about 8 minutes, there was a moment of silence held there by another Republican congressman who was at that event, at the start of that event. Let's just do a quick recap here, George, to see Senator Jeff Flake there in that baseball jersey talking about these harrowing details was really, really something. He says that 50 shots being fired on that baseball field is an understatement. We know from our John Carl's reporting, 4 people were shot, 1 staffer, 1 member of Steve Scalise's detail, a lobbyist, and of course, Representative Steve Scalise, whose injuries are not life-threatening. We believe he was shot in the hip. George, I do want to say that we just got word that we've received word that the vice president's speech that was supposed to happen at 9 o'clock Eastern was just canceled. We also know that one person who was on that baseball field, Ohio Congressman Brad Wenstrup, is a doctor. He was, George, an Army Reserve combat doctor who was among those who tended to Steve Scalise on that baseball diamond this morning.
And we are waiting. We expect the Alexandria Police Chief Brown to be speaking shortly in Alexandria. In the meantime, I want to go to an eyewitness who's on the phone with us as well right now, Noah Nathan. Noah, tell us where you were, what you saw.
I was in a dog park right next to the field, and I was just going into the dog park. There's sort of like an entryway. You go in, and you go in, you lock it, and you go in. And when I heard the first shot, and of course at first I didn't think it was a shot, but it was some kid with fireworks. And then I heard another one, and then some people running. And so I just laid down on the ground and holding on to my dog just to make sure they wouldn't run off, because I wasn't able to close the gate behind me. And then just trying to figure out where the shots were coming from. There were some, you could hear them go by, you could hear them and see them flash off the road, the little trail, and hitting some of the tents. And then I realized, let me try and get behind this little trash can in there, and realized there was nothing I could do. And so let me just get my phone out. So I started recording it. The police have that video, so I haven't got my phone back yet. So hopefully they can use it.
What were you recording? As what exactly?
I was just trying to find out where the shooter was. So I was just aiming around. I could see the shooter was by, I don't know if it was by the snack bar or in the dugout, but he was in that area. And then there were a lot of people running. There was, what I understand now, is the congressman on the outfield. He was laying down. He wasn't moving. A lot of people were just trying to get out of the way. And then police were returning fire. Police or Circuit Zero was returning fire. And it took a long time. I'm sure it felt like a lot longer than it was. And eventually, it just, all the shooting ended, and when they got him, and then we were able to just get up, walk around, and try and realize what just happened.
Did you get any kind of a good look at the shooter? I know he was moving around. I know he was behind that dugout. Any detail on what he looked like, what he was wearing?
Not that I could see. I was trying to record it, and that way they can do something with the video. Maybe they can blow it up and use something. But with my own eye, I couldn't see. But I was about 100 yards away.
And you saw only one, and you didn't see the shooter, but you were aware of only one shooter on the scene?
Correct, as far as I know. I could see where they were coming from, and I could see where the police were shooting towards. So I could see the police shooting back, but I couldn't see the shooter itself. I could just hear the bullets and see the bullets.
And from where you were,
ricocheting.
Excuse me, from where you were, could you hear anything? Was the shooter saying anything?
I couldn't hear the shooter saying anything. I could hear the police. I don't know if they were trying to get him to lay his gun down, and then some of the people that were being shot were saying, "Screw that, just shoot him, put him down." But I knew it wasn't the type of thing you expect before you have your coffee in the morning.
Yeah, that is not exactly what you'd expect at that park at any time. As we've been told, and you're there, I guess, every day. This is just a peaceful family park.
Yeah, well, it's a dog park. It's a nice family dog park. The dogs run around, get some exercise. So, but every morning, or at least most mornings, the baseball team's been here practicing. So it's sort of like not a secret. And usually there's Secret Service or some kind of protection here with them.
So
I guess maybe they.
So it was pretty well known that the members of Congress had been practicing in that park?
Right. I think it's just the Republicans here. I don't know where the Democrats practice. But yeah, but at most mornings they're here practicing for the game. And it's, it's nice. Some of them will bring kids. Like this morning there were some kids there. I guess they were out of school, but there was a father and son. I don't know who they were, but they were practicing batting in the batting cages. There were some kids in the outfield, I guess. But yeah, I don't know who this guy is. I don't know anything about him, but I don't know.
It's just so hard to even contemplate that someone would want to open fire on a scene like that. Noah, thanks very much for sharing your story with us, for also sharing that tape with the police. We want to keep our eye on the scene right there. I'm bringing Jen Ashton as well right now as we show what was happening to Congressman Scalise earlier. We're learning a little more detail about how he was treated on the scene.
Right, George, and this is another opportunity to give a shout out to the first responders, the paramedics, the EMTs. What I want you to pay attention to in that footage is that the congressman obviously has had his shirt removed. That is standard procedure. When you have bleeding, uncontrolled bleeding, or something like a gunshot wound at the scene, the first premise of those responders is to expose the area to get control of that bleeding above the point of entry. So if you have a hip injury, obviously you would need to expose the lower abdomen, the chest. They have to inspect the patient to find out if there were other entry wounds or exit wounds. And first responders do not pass their credentialing exam without passing two very important premises. Is the scene safe? Do they have their gloves on? And we have to remember, put yourself in these first responders' shoes. They don't know that that scene is safe. And they are yet being called in to give emergency medical attention to someone who is assumed to be hemodynamically unstable, who's just suffered a gunshot wound. And if you look again at that footage of the congressman, he has nasal oxygen. He has IV lines taped to his arm. He has EKG monitors to his chest. This is extensive, basic trauma medical procedure done in the field. We have to recognize the skill and fortitude and composure of these first responders.
You're right. When they go there, they don't know.
They have no idea. And in fact, it's so counterintuitive because any first responder, police officer, firefighter, paramedic, EMT, we go into those fields to want to help people, but yet you will fail your exam, your credentialing exam, if you go into an area that is not secured. And so they have to kind of make an assessment. The police in the area would tell them, this scene is not secure, you cannot go and help that patient, but yet you're seeing them do it. And also we have to remember, to be clear, this is not something that many of them may have ever done before, but yet they are trained to execute it and do it in a calm, methodical fashion. They deserve a tremendous shout out.
And we're getting some information from one of the congressmen who was on the scene, who had served in Iraq, Congressman Brad Wenstrup, who helped treat Congressman Scalise. He said, I felt like I was back in Iraq, but without my weapon. And he describes what they were doing: compression on the wound, checking, and doing what they call a sweep.
Yeah, now that's interesting. That's the premise of our EMT or paramedic system, is we stabilize our patients in the field. In other parts of the world, they do what's called a load and roll. They just get that patient into an ambulance or a chopper and they get them to the hospital. So you've seen pretty extensive stabilization that was done at the scene. But for bleeding, 100%, and anyone listening can do this themselves. You put direct, firm, continuous pressure on a wound and you do not look.
Another important point he makes is hydration. He says the congressman is saying he was thirsty, although we see this is the Alexandria police chief. Let's go there quickly.
Be interviewed. Once we have more information, we will certainly pass on whatever information we can to make sure that you have the information you need for your work.
Thank you
very much. I'm going to turn it. I'm going to turn it back over to the Alexandria chief.
Thank you, Chief. We're not going to ask it, folks. We're not going to answer any questions at this point because this, as the chief pointed out, this is an active, ongoing investigation. We call the crime scene. We're not going to ask it, folks. We're not going to answer any questions. It's premature for us to respond any further. In an hour and a half, we will come back together and give you an update on what we can speak to, and perhaps answer some questions at that time.
Any indication of an ongoing shooting? Any other shooters out there?
This is a stable situation at this point. There's no additional threat. We consider this incident to be a closed incident under investigation. Thank you very much. We'll be back with you in about an hour and a half. Thank you.
A lot of information there from the police chief, calling it a stable situation, a closed situation, but an active investigation. Brad Garrett, former FBI special agent, what will they be doing next?
Well, George, the real key here is going to be what was something beyond the shooter? In other words, was there other activities? What was in his car? How did he get there? Did he travel with somebody else? I'm sure they pulled a cell phone, but to see who is he talked to recently and looked at social media, because as you and I talked a few minutes ago, they must be 100% sure he's the only guy. And so that's still the immediate activity, and that's why I think both police chiefs wouldn't give any answers, because they still don't really know exactly what they have here other than a shooting scene.
Okay, Senator Jeff Flake is now joining us on the phone. Of course, Senator Flake was there at the scene at the baseball practice this morning. Senator Flake, we're glad you're okay. Early indications now also that Congressman Scalise is going to be okay. Some encouraging news there as well. Tell us what happened.
Well, we were having batting practice. I just batted, fielded, and was standing near the dugout talking to our manager, Joe Barton, Texas, and we heard a loud bang, and it sounded like a shot to us, but until the second one came, then the third, and then a rally, we weren't sure, and it was this pandemonium that you can imagine. He had a clear view of the field near the third base dugout and seemed to be firing indiscriminately. He had a rifle initially. I think he had handguns as well. He had a lot of ammo, I can tell you that. Steve Scalise was hit pretty early and dragged himself out into the field. Several of us dove into the first base dugout, and then the Capitol Police started returning fire from behind us. And I'm here.
So yeah, you were in the first base dugout. The shooter was behind the third base dugout.
Around that area, he was outside of the fence, and then he came around and behind home plate, and I got a look at him then. He had a clear view into our dugout. There were about 12 people in our dugout on the ground, and he had a clear view in, so we had to get back down. And this went on for 10 minutes at least, with dozens and dozens and dozens of rounds fired. I didn't know, we couldn't tell for a while if those behind us were friendly or if there was another shooter. And we didn't know if we should stay in the dugout. I wanted to get to Steve Scalise laying out there in the field, but while there were bullets flying overhead, I couldn't. And as soon as somebody yelled, "Shooters down," I sprinted out to Steve, and he had a shot to the left hip and was bleeding quite a bit. So put pressure on that for a while until the medics arrived.
Could you get any, you said you saw the shooter, you said you thought he had a rifle and maybe some handguns as well. What else can you tell us about him? Size?
He looked to be in probably his 40s, dark hair and a blue shirt. We weren't looking too long. Obviously, he had clear sight to us, so we were trying to get down. And there were bullets, whizzing around the whole time. So it was a horrible scene. A couple of Capitol policemen were shot as well. Those that were returning fire. The one was shot in the leg or by the ankle, and he kept returning fire. Can you hold for 1 second? 1 second.
Certainly. We're hearing also now from Congresswoman Gabby Giffords. Of course, she was shot back in 2011. She says, "My heart is with my former colleagues, their families and staff in the U.S. Capitol Police, public servants and heroes today and every day." We do know the U.S. Capitol Police returned fire on that shooter. Senator Jeff Flake was just telling us the shooter is down. Alexandria police have just said it is a stable, closed situation at this point. Expect to come out with more details in the next hour and a half. Cecilia Vega on the scene for us at the White House.
George, we're told that the vice president is on his way here to the White House. He had an event scheduled that was supposed to be taking place right now. That event has been canceled. We know this White House is monitoring, obviously, this situation very closely. The vice president has sent out a tweet extending his thoughts and prayers to to Steve Scalise. He says Karen, of course, his wife, and I are praying for Steve Scalise, the Capitol Police, and all hurt. They praying for a speedy recovery. Our hearts are with them and their loved ones. That same sentiment, of course, came from President Trump earlier this morning. This is a very fluid situation, but George, as I just said, the vice president is now on his way here to the White House.
Vice President on his way to his White House. We're hearing from the U.S. Capitol Police as well right now, confirming this incident and beefing up the police presence around the Capitol right now. We can expect that at the Capitol, Pierre, likely around Washington, D.C. today.
Exactly, George. They have to respond because of the potential for copycats. What you're going to see inside the Capitol, additional police, more dogs walking around, bomb-sniffing dogs even, and law enforcement officials are pointing to the fact that in this case, we have yet another example of a mass shooting.
Investigates his believed involvement with ex-KCSO deputies Logan August and Derek Penny.
There's no indication at this point that there is any type of criminal investigation that is ongoing either with the Department of Justice or law enforcement agency.
To mow your grass.
Well, that's an understatement right there. I want to bring Brad Garrett back in as well, confirming pretty much what we've now heard right now, with one additional detail from Senator Flake right there, the idea that he may have had handguns in addition to rifles, this shooter, and was able to get off a number of shots relatively unmolested for several minutes.
But apparently not a very good shooter, George. I mean, I will tell you, it doesn't take a lot of training to accurately shoot an AR-15 or some version thereof. So something was causing him not to shoot accurately. Because, you know, the timing of these things, George, we never know until after the fact. With the first initial shots, did the Capitol Police then start returning fire, which then threw him off? Well, and he either couldn't shoot. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, what bolsters your point is, from we heard from Senator Flake, is that in some ways the members of Congress and a child as well were basically sitting ducks inside that dugout.
Right. So, you know, what does that tell you? That tells you that his intent was to go after the players, the adult players, which obviously are people that are attached in some form or fashion to the GOP. So, you know, this is not uncommon sometimes in these shootings, where the focus is not like when we talk about Islamic extremists, where they just want to shoot anybody in sight, versus what I would call targeted shooting, where they're really going for a particular group or individual, and I think that's what you have today.
Knowing, because it was well known, as we've learned from other eyewitnesses, that the members of Congress had been practicing there for several days.
Exactly. I mean, the idea that virtually anybody could figure out where they might be at any given point playing baseball. And the other thing, George, is there's a reasonableness factor here about how much security can you have. I mean, you can't take 150 Capitol Police officers with you every time you go play a baseball game. It's just not reasonable. So as as Senator Paul pointed out a few minutes ago to you, George, without those two officers there to at least deflect and/or basically put down the shooter from the standpoint of his ability to continue to shoot accurately, literally is what stopped this shooting to be. This conversation would be probably about multiple casualties.
How soon will they be able to start interrogating the gunman?
Well, I'm sure they've already started. The Alexandria police, which this is their jurisdiction, probably have him back at their shop, would be my guess. You're going to have FBI agents there and probably Capitol Police. But the interviewing of him, I guarantee you, started shortly after they got him into a car.
Yeah, right away. And they did say, the Alexandria police said they would be coming back in about an hour and a half with more information. We're getting some more information now from Congressman Roger Williams, who was at the game as well, who says that even though the congressman was not shot, this is a statement from his office, a member of his staff was shot and is receiving medical attention. So Cecilia Vega, now we're getting more and more reports from those on the scene who were wounded. So far, no indications that any of these wounds are life-threatening.
Yeah, thankfully, George, and we saw that image of Representative Steve Scalise just being wheeled out on that stretcher, and heard from Senator Jeff Flake, who was there in his baseball jersey. Just hard to really get your mind around these images that are coming in right now. We do know, as I've been saying, that the White House is monitoring closely. The president, the vice president have both tweeted. We understand that there has been a huge increase in police presence, visible police presence outside the Capitol there as these images still come in from that baseball practice. Just for our viewers outside of Washington, to say one more time, this is a suburb of the district. This is where a number of people live and commute into Washington. It's about 7 miles or so away from the White House, and this baseball practice was happening before a big game that was to take place on Saturday, something that is celebrated between the Democrats and the Republicans on the Hill, an annual tradition. And so, George, I do want to just reiterate to you some information that we have coming in right now, some pretty incredible details from a Congressman, Ron DeSantis, who is from Florida, I believe, who was on that baseball diamond. He is describing the shooting at that practice. He says that that a shooter walked up. George, this is in an interview on Fox News. I want to say a shooter walked up to us asking whether it was Republicans or Democrats out there. The congressman says he found that a little odd, and then the shooter walked toward the area where all of this happened. And they did not see him to be carrying anything at the time. But again, George, just absolutely incredible. This is one congressman's account from that baseball field. He says that the shooter specifically asked whether there were Republicans or Democrats out on that field. We know that this was a Republican baseball practice. And then, as others have told us, that shooter opened fire. One senator telling us that 50 shots fired would be an understatement. Some telling us as many as 100 people. And of course, 4 people injured, shot out on that field today.
Okay, Cecilia, thanks very much. I want to bring Brad Garrett back in on that. Again, this is one account from a congressman who was on the scene saying that he heard the shooter ask if these were Republicans and Democrats. Kind of bolsters your initial theory that this was somewhat targeted.
Clearly. And that whatever his agenda is, it's focused on the Republicans. And I'm going to guess, George, not anybody in particular. That this was a sort of a global, I'm angry at this group or that group, and I'm going to go after them. This is a guy that probably didn't think a lot about this. As you mentioned earlier, he didn't show up with any body armor, did show up with a lot of armament, maybe a handgun in addition. But beyond that, probably no planning. Angry, something set him off last night or this morning, and he's going to take action because, these guys feel powerless. And this stuff, at least temporarily, empowers them. It's like they're taking control of their life. Granted, that's totally illogical, obviously. But, if you pull these kind of stunts, you're not a logical person to begin with.
Right, but you're saying this fits a relatively common profile?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Not knowing one more thing about him, George, that's what you're going to have. You're going to have a guy that's probably not been very successful in life or has had some recent failures, is blaming, at least at this point, the GOP in whatever his issues are in life. What they do, George, is externalize basically their problems, so that their problems become our problems. And they go after people they think collectively have harmed them. And I think that's what you got with this guy.
Brad Garrett, thanks very much. I want to bring in Congressman Brad Westrup on the phone as well from Ohio. Congressman, thank you for joining us right now. I know you were there. I'm sorry, Congressman Westrup. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Boy, we heard you were right on the scene quickly helping to treat Congressman Scalise. Tell us what you were able to do and describe what was happening on the scene.
Well, I was just going in the batting cage and I heard a gunshot, and then we heard several more, and I saw Steve Scalise was down around second base. So I was down along the right field line. Everyone hit the deck and started scurrying for cover. Fortunately, there is a security detail with Mr. Scalise, or otherwise we would have had no one there, unfortunately, to protect us. But they were there, and so they were able to return fire. But he was very crafty. He was behind the third base dugout on the outfield side, firing towards third base and second base, and then he moved to the more infield side of the dugout and was firing. And he kept mobile. And then he went around behind a building that's behind home plate and was firing the same rifle, it seems, from there, and went back around the building and at some point came out with a pistol, and that's when the security detail was able to take him down. When it appeared they had him down, I ran out onto the field with Jeff Flake to Steve and did what I did in Iraq, and you assess their wounds and you cut down their clothes and look for the wound and make sure that you stop the bleeding. And when the medics got there, we were able to bandage him more appropriately, made sure that Steve was conscious, and we started giving him as much fluid as we could through Gatorade and water.
So
he was losing a lot of blood.
He was conscious all the time you were with him?
Yes, and I was testing Steve count to 5, things like that, just to make sure, Steve, you know where you are. Yeah, the baseball field. So he was conscious the whole time. He was noticeably in pain, and of course we tried not to move him very much to minimize any further injury.
We just heard a report that Congressman DeSantis said that before the gunman opened fire, he had heard him ask, are these Democrats or Republicans? Did you hear anything at all from the shooter? Could you hear him saying anything?
I was too far away to hear him say anything, but the report was that one of the members left practice a little early, and someone approached him saying, are these Republicans or Democrats? And he said, these are Republicans, and that was the end of the conversation. There's a lot of people that walk around this ballpark, walk their dogs out exercising in the morning, and so it's not uncommon to have people gathering around, but we certainly weren't expecting something like this.
Yeah, this is a place you had been practicing pretty regularly, right?
Yeah, for years this is where we practice, and it's early in the morning, and we start around 6:30 in the morning, and so you really don't expect it to be a time of day that. But, today it seems like anything will happen. It's a sad day.
It is such a sad day, and, thank goodness you were able to get there and treat the congressman so quickly. You mentioned your service in Iraq. From what you could tell, the way the shooter was maneuvering and shooting, did it seem like he had any kind of training?
I don't know, not based on his first shot and the reports of his first shot, because his first shot missed. But I don't know the extent of his training. But he certainly was well equipped, had a lot of ammunition, and he at least knew how to maneuver somewhat. But it was strange, George, at the end that he came out more in the open with his pistol. And but I'm glad he did, because that's when they were able to take him down.
Had he already been taking fire when he came out into the open with his pistol?
Oh yeah, he had been. He had definitely been under fire, and you could hear the air coming out of some of the vehicles there. Right now, many of us are on a bus heading back to Capitol Hill because they closed the scene down, and we left our cars and equipment and whatever else we would have had there. It wasn't on it.
Have you received any other guidance from the Capitol Police or the Speaker's office about things going forward, increased security, anything like that?
Yeah, we do. They're always getting prepared for such things. Although it's kind of surreal when you hear that first gunshot, because you can't believe it is actually happening. But I think people amazingly were brave and responded appropriately. And members had to maneuver too. Some were hiding behind trees. And when this guy moved, then they had to move. and you saw people move from one position to the other to get to a more secure place behind a building rather than a tree. So I think people did a great job. I can tell you firsthand, Steve Scalise was extremely brave and did what he was supposed to do to minimize any damage. He might have been in worse shape if there was not some return fire because he had to lay in position to minimize this damage.
How about the others who were injured? We heard reports of at least one of the Capitol Police being shot, a staffer, a lobbyist. Do you know anything about their condition at all?
I don't know their conditions, and probably wouldn't be able to report on it if I could. But I know that two others, law enforcement, were injured. One staffer was injured, and there might have been one other. And then people had contusions and abrasions from diving onto concrete and trying to get themselves out of harm's way.
And about how many people were out there? Members. I know there were some family members as well. How big was the group today?
Well, you have about 25 members of Congress, and then staff, I would say, we're up between 40, around 40 or so.
So 40 people out there, including children. Okay, well, Congressman, thank you. Thank you for telling us what you're able to learn today, and also for that big help you gave to Congressman Scalise as well. We're glad you're okay right now. You know you're working your way back to the Capitol. I want to go back to Pierre Thomas, our senior justice correspondent. A lot more details coming in now, a portrait of what may have happened there on the scene.
Exactly, George. I also just spoke to Congressman Peter King, who has in the past served on the Homeland Security Committee, and he talked about just how fortunate that the congressmen were today. He spoke about the fact you just had the Congressman Winthrop on, who is a medical doctor, and the fact that he was there at the scene and able to help Congressman Scalise. Also, he said that, again, his early information that he's been provided, no nexus to international terrorism at the moment. Again, it's early in the investigation. The shooter's background is being investigated as we speak. And he also spoke about the fact that the law enforcement officials, again, able to respond quickly to keep this from being worse than what it was. He also said that he expected that there will be more security throughout the Capitol today as police try to just put everyone at ease and prepare for the possibility of any kind of copycat situation, George.
Okay, Pierre, thanks. David Curley is on the scene now in Alexandria. Massive police presence, David, but as we just heard from the chief, right now they consider this a stable situation.
I would call it a stable situation and agree with the police chief on that, George, but he also called this a closed incident. And with all due respect to the police chief, this is a very active scene, as you can see behind me. Still blocks and blocks here are cordoned off with yellow police tape. A police helicopter was just flying overhead moments ago. So there is still a tremendous amount of police presence here as they continue their investigation, which the police chief say they are doing. Now, as Pierre Thomas mentioned, it was a very quick response. The police chief pointed out that within 3 minutes they had officers at the park, which is, if you look down here, you can kind of see the fire trucks on the left side. The park is up to the left side, but you can see they've already moved us back 2 or 3 blocks. And as I say, it's this entire area in Alexandria that remains cordoned off as police now conduct their investigation with the Federal Bureau of Investigation and, of course, the ATF as well, George.
So they're all on the scene, and we expect to hear from the police in about an hour?
We're supposed to hear from the police again. If you were there with the news conference here just a little while ago, in which the police chief said they weren't going to answer any questions at that point. We've gotten so much information from some of the witnesses, including the 2 senators that you spoke to earlier. We have a pretty good sense of what happened here, but we'll get more from the police officers and the police chief in another news briefing. Yes, it was supposed to be in about an hour.
Yeah, and from what we can tell, this all started to unfold around 7 o'clock this morning in Alexandria, Virginia, the Delray Park in Alexandria, Virginia, where members of Congress, Republican members of Congress, senators, and members of the House were practicing for their annual baseball game. A lone gunman, described as a white man in his late 40s, early 50s, in a blue shirt, with a rifle and perhaps a handgun as well, opened fire on the field from behind the third base dugout, hitting Congressman Steve Scalise and at least 4 others as well injured. The gunman is now down, is in custody. As we were just saying, the police consider this a closed incident. No indications yet that this is tied to terrorism, no indications of a motive either as yet. We have one report from one member of Congress that someone at the scene had walked up to him and asked if this were Republicans or Democrats on the field. No confirmation that that was indeed the shooter. But Cecilia Vega at the White House, you've been with us all morning. The White House been on top of this all morning. We've heard from President Trump and Vice President Pence as well, and this has sent a shockwave throughout the Capitol.
Absolute shockwave, especially here on the grounds of the White House, and the street outside the White House here, right over my shoulder, has been closed to tourists. Just we're told out of an abundance of caution, George. But I do just want to reiterate what you just said, because these details are coming in, and it's a very fluid scene. And that Congressman DeSantis, who he did not say that this was the shooter, that he believes this was the shooter that walked up and asked whether this was Democrats or Republicans out on that field. He said that this was a man walked up, but that he found it very strange, and this happened before the shooting. Another Congressman, Mo Brooks, more details coming in from him right now, he says he and Brooks was out on the field when this happened, actually at bat, that he never heard the shooter utter a word. What he did hear, again, more details from that baseball diamond, screaming, a lot of hollering. People were yelling, shooter, shooter, active shooter in the dugout. And then we saw, he says, those Congress members laid on the ground as the shooting took place. And we know, as these details are coming in, that many of them rushed to the aid of Congressman Steve Scalise, who was hit, we believe, in the hip, but is going to be, is in stable condition and thankfully going to be okay. But George, yes, the White House is monitoring this closely. The word from the president and the vice president is both from them is that everyone is in their thoughts and prayers as they watch this situation.
Okay, Cecilia Vega at the White House. Mary Bruce on Capitol Hill right now, our congressional correspondent. We're also getting the first reaction from the Speaker of the House, Paul Ryan.
We are, George. And first I want to tell you, I am back here in our Senate office because they are clearing out the area in front of the Capitol. We know that out of an abundance of caution, they say, while the Capitol complex is still operating, they are now clearing out tourists from the area. It was actually, I'm having trouble getting in and out of the building now. Just moments ago when I came in about 15 minutes ago, it was still open. Tourists were walking around. I actually saw some lawmakers out taking pictures with constituents. That has now all changed because out of an abundance of caution, they are now going ahead and shutting down the area in front of the Capitol.
They're shutting down the area in front of the Capitol. Speaker Ryan out with a tweet saying this morning the hearts of the whole House are with Steve Scalise, the brave Capitol Police staff, and all those who were in harm's way. And Mary, we were talking about this before, but in recent years, the Capitol really has been fortified against incidents like this, barriers to block automobiles across the complex, and metal detectors as well for all the tourists.
Absolutely, George. Even on a normal day, getting into the Capitol is not necessarily an easy thing. There are many different layers of security for any member of the public, even members of the press, those of us with credentials. We have to go through magnetometers. We have to have our bags searched. Everything gets looked at carefully. And then even further out on the perimeter, you know, the roads in the area close by, nearby the Capitol building and the office buildings are all blocked with those barriers. So any car coming near the Capitol building, those office buildings, is also checked very closely. Now, we've been talking a lot about security. Members of leadership like Steve Scalise travel everywhere with their personal detail. That includes within this building itself. So, you know we talk to members a lot in the hallways up here, and every time that we talk with a member of leadership, their security detail is with them, even if they're just walking from the floor back to their office or moving from meeting to meeting. That detail with them always, and of course with Steve Scalise today. But other members of Congress don't travel with their own personal detail. We see them walking freely between buildings, often out and about in town without necessarily a robust security presence. That's
the point. You really only have a handful of very senior members of Congress who have that security.
Absolutely. It's just the leadership usually. So, of course, Scalise is the Republican whip, the third top-ranking Republican in the House. He has a security detail with him everywhere he goes. Paul Ryan, on the Senate side, also Senate leadership as well. But, rank-and-file members don't travel with security. And so when you have an instance like this morning where you have, a whole baseball field full of lawmakers, that's why you only see the personal detail of Congressman Scalise seem to be the only security there.
And from what we can tell, those U.S. Capitol Police, the security detail on the scene there, saved a lot of lives today. Okay, Mary Bruce, thanks very much. I want to go back. We have another eyewitness on tape right now.
Unreal. I've been here for close to 20 years. Never have any problems. You barely hear police sirens. And for something like this to happen is just, again, unreal.
And the fact that it is members of Congress, who were involved in this charity baseball game, does that impact you in any way more so than, just the simple fact that there's a shooting here?
I mean, it's just, again, members of Congress. It could have been Democrats, Republicans, what have you. Simple game of baseball. It's not even 9 a.m. yet, and again, people getting shot up. And it seemed like the guy was firing on whoever.
Pierre Thomas, you've made the point, these just routines of daily life, baseball games, kids going to school, meetings at workplaces, interrupted by these horrible scenes of gunfire.
And two that quickly come to mind, George, are that Colorado theater shooting of a few years back. So many injured and killed at that. Also Newtown, of course. And we were just looking at some of the recent mass shootings, usually involving assault rifles of some sort. And this is a list of some of the, you can't see it very closely, but this is just a list of printout of shooting after shooting after shooting after shooting, a part of American life, often interrupting the quiet of a normal neighborhood. You've heard witness after witness saying this kind of thing doesn't happen there, but this kind of occurrence in American life happens routinely, George.
It certainly does. We're going to go back now. We have Congressman Jack Bergman on the phone right now, also a member of Congress who was on the scene that day. Congressman, what can you tell us about what you saw?
Well, good morning. It's spent 40 years in the Marines. Not the first time I heard gunfire. And standing by the batting cage when the first round rang out, everybody kind of listened, and then another one came following it shortly thereafter, and we knew it was real. Everybody just started to scramble. But from my perspective, standing right by the batting cage and hearing where the gunfire came from, I did a Marine low crawl and got behind the first base dugout to seek cover. That was my first step.
And were you able to see the shooter?
Nope, he was hidden behind the third base dugout. The only people that would have probably had a chance to see him would have been those standing out by third base or shortstop or maybe left field or second base, because he was at an angle where he was shielded from anybody that was on the from home plate to first base side initially.
And we've heard from Senator Paul and others who said that he was able to shoot for a while, anywhere from 5 to 10 minutes, fairly unmolested, was able to get off a lot of rounds.
Well, he was, because he was concealed. He was moving around. It appeared as though he was moving down the third baseline, if you will. He was outside the chain link fence because those gates are locked. And he was moving towards the backstop. So those of us who had sought cover behind the first base dugout got around the end and got into the first base dugout because the cement would at least have, deflected the rounds. And at that point, the Whip Scalise's security team was engaging, and they were coming from behind the first base dugout where their vehicle was parked outside the fence. So they were engaging him, and when it was all over, he was down kind of behind home plate, if you will, outside of the backstop, outside of the chain link fence.
You say he was moving a fair amount. Was he frantic, methodical? Did it seem like he knew what he was doing?
Couldn't tell because I didn't get eyes on him until after he was down.
Well, this is such an unimaginable thing to be happening at your baseball practice. How's everybody doing? Have you been able to contact your other members, the others who are on the scene?
Yeah, I mean, this is a if you will, this is the kind of experience that puts most people, into some lower or mid-level of shock because you're observing this. You were actually potentially part of it, and now it's the value here of the group is that we're together. We're on a bus heading back to. In fact, we're just about to pull into the Cannon House office building parking lot here, but we're the safety and security of the group and the sharing of the experience, I believe, will help everybody get through this.
Well, thank goodness for that. Before I let you go, do you know anything else about the condition of the others who were shot?
I do not. I was with Whip Scalise when they were applying the tourniquet, and I saw the officer who she took the shot in the lower leg, but that's about all I know. That those two will survive, no problems.
Well, Congressman Bergman, we're glad you are okay. Thank you for sharing your story. I know you're pulling into the Capitol right now. Jen Ashton is here, Dr. Jen Ashton as well. Tourniquet on the hip for Steve Scalise. What would they be doing now?
So once someone, let's say, who's gotten a gunshot wound to the hip arrives at a level 1 trauma center, very quick assessment in the trauma bay. Is the patient stable or unstable? Is their blood pressure, heart rate? What's the control of the bleeding? If they are stable, they go for rapid imaging. So that would be x-rays, sonograms, CAT scans. Those surgeons and teams want to get a view of where that bullet went. You can often see an entry wound. You can't always find the exit wound. And again, what the trajectory of that bullet was in the body, that then determines what teams you need in the operating room. If it's bullet to bone, that would be orthopedic trauma surgeons. If there's vascular injury, you're talking about big blood vessels in the pelvis, that would be vascular teams. And we have to remember, when a patient like this, or patients, in this case possibly 5, arrive at one trauma center, this is not just about the surgeons. There are trauma nurses, there are technicians, ancillary staff that all go on disaster mode at a hospital like this to care for these patients.
We also heard the congressman right there, a 3-star general, served in the Marines, said it wasn't the first time he heard gunfire, but he also talked about something that a lot of people who are on that scene are going to be dealing with right now, shock.
Shock and trauma. And if you listen carefully, George, to some of the eyewitness accounts, you can actually hear it in their voices. There's kind of a detachment. They're talking about what they saw in a very matter-of-fact way. You know, I saw a shooter, I heard, 5 minutes of gunshots and bullet shots. That's not a normal thing to be saying to someone at any time of day, let alone in the morning in this environment. So no question, psychological trauma is a factor here, and there will be mental health counselors dealing with these patients and the first responders in the coming hours and days.
I want to go back to another eyewitness on the scene, a photographer who was there, and you saw the shooter. Tell me your name. Tell me what you saw.
Marty Lavore. I was standing near first base. I saw a white male with a rifle, and what went through my mind, I was surprised. Why would anybody bring a rifle to a ballpark? But he was behind the third base gate, behind the fence. And then when he started firing, all I heard was, "Go into the dugout." And I dove into the dugout on top of a congressman. And because I'm not a gunman, I figured that he was finished. And apparently it was a clip that he was reloading. And he started shooting again. And so while we were on the ground, there was somebody in the dugout saying, "Get closer to the wall because he's shooting towards the dugout." And somebody told me after we got out that a bullet apparently went into the dugout because it took out a piece of concrete on the wall.
So into the dugout. What else can you tell us about the shooter from the limited things you could see? Did he say anything?
It happened so fast. I mean, he was just picture somebody standing outside of the third base gate when there's a baseball practice on. Somehow your mind doesn't assess spectators. And then I saw him lift the weapon, and then we were told to get into the dugout. But he seemed very calm.
Seemed very calm? Shooting?
That's a fraction of a second look. I didn't see, and from a distance from first base to way behind third base. So we're talking about long distance.
And then after about, 10 minutes, the Capitol Police were able to return fire. Did you see any of that, see any of the aftermath?
I did not say 10 minutes. All I remember is the Capitol Police. The reason why we knew the Capitol Police were firing was that there were two different sounds from the weapons.
Right. Okay, well, thank you very much, Marty Lavore. Thank you for telling us about that. I want to go to another witness there, Ron DeSantis, Congressman Ron DeSantis, who was at the field as well today. Congressman, thank you for joining us today as well. And forgive me, but I believe that you actually had left the practice a little early.
Yeah, so I was actually fielding ground balls at third,
Jeff Duncan from South Carolina was at short. Steve was at second base. We had all hit already. Other guys were hitting. And Jeff and I just looked at each other, because D.C. traffic's terrible. We said, hey, let's just get on the road so we can get back to the hill. So that was probably 5 minutes, 10 minutes before the shot started. As we went to our car, there was an individual, middle-aged Caucasian male, that asked us, hey, is that Republicans, Democrats, what? And we're like, Republicans. And then he kind of turned and went towards the field. So I've passed along that description to the Capitol Police. Jeff has. But as soon as we saw the news, we both called each other and said, was that guy that confronted us? It was just an odd confrontation. So some of these things you just kind of clicks. And so we both provided that. But this is a wide open field. I mean, it's a community field. People can show up. They can sit in the bleachers. They're just like picnic table type bleachers. Him on the third base side, we all use the first base dugout. So all the coaches, staff, our equipment is all on the first base. Third base side is just kind of wide open.
You used the word confronted. What was his manner?
It was just weird. We were in the car, and he kind of like walked over to us and asked us that. Again, I definitely didn't think he was going to, if it even is the same guy, we don't know that
Was
yet.
he wearing a blue shirt?
I think he was, but I'm not 100% sure. It was, I kind of saw him more from the chest up, because I was in the back seat of the car by then, and he kind of talked to Jeff in the passenger side. But it was just the type of thing, you kind of think about, then you shrug, and then as soon as this happened, Jeff and I both called each other and said, man, we got to pass along that description. So, and there's not a lot, George, it's in the community, so you do have people who walk their dogs and all this other stuff. So it's not like there's never anybody there, but there's definitely not that many people who would actually be kind of in like the stands or anything like that who weren't. And if Steve was not there, as a member of the leadership, he gets this security detail. If he was not there, then you would have had all the staff and Congress members, and there would not have been anybody on scene who could have responded.
That would have been just terrific. One of the things, the shooter's also been described as someone with dark hair. Did you get a look at his hair? Remember it?
Well, the gentleman that came to us did have dark hair. I don't know if it's the same guy, but that gentleman had dark hair. Yes, white Caucasian male with dark hair.
And in his late 40s, early 50s.
That's correct.
That does match the other descriptions we've heard so far, but of course we can't know for sure. What else have you been able to hear from other members of Congress since you've left?
Well, everything I've heard from a variety of sources is that the whip is obviously injured, but that he's gonna pull through, which is obviously a relief. We think the same with the staff. And with Congressman Williams. And so, obviously that's a very, very important thing for us, and we're all kind of on pins and needles making sure that these guys pull through.
Just as a rank and file member of Congress, what kind of security briefings do you get? What do you learn about how you should handle yourself, what you should be careful about?
It's interesting, George. Our security briefings are much more focused on when you're in your district, because the idea is when we're on the Hill, if we're in the office buildings or in the Capitol building, you have the Capitol Police. The people that come and go to our offices have got to go through the magnetometers. And so it's usually, okay, if you guys are going to do a town hall or you're going to do something like this, here are the best practices. Here's what you need to be doing for security. So we've done that on various town halls. The local law enforcement will work with us, but that's kind of, there's way more security up here than there is in the district. Now the baseball thing is kind of a fluke. We all just show up, and there would have been zero security had Steve not been there, and that's just something that we've been doing for years.
But this play, and you've been practicing at this field for years, so it is possible that someone knew that you all had been going to this park on a regular basis.
Without question. And not only that, if you were just passing by, you got a lot of guys that are in their 50s and 60s. You do see some security when Scalise is there. So it's clearly not just like a community youth baseball or anything like that. It is something that would obviously be different for somebody that's looking by, and it wouldn't be that difficult to put two and two together, even if you knew nothing about it previously.
Congressman Ron DeSantis, thanks very much for joining us right now. I want to go back to Mary Bruce on Capitol Hill.
George, we just got an update on the condition of Majority Whip Steve Scalise. His office says that he is undergoing surgery, but he is in stable condition. They also discuss his mood a little bit. They say he was in good spirits despite the horrific event and the injury to his hip. They confirmed that he was shot in the hip. They say that he actually spoke on the phone with his wife. And that he is grateful for the brave actions, they say, of U.S. Capitol Police, the first responders, and his colleagues. And George, we should note we are seeing just a complete outpouring of support up here on Capitol Hill from leadership, from rank and file members, everyone showing their support for those who were injured, and of course for those brave first responders that you were just talking about, who, if they had not been there, if they were not there to protect Leader Scalise, you shudder to think what may have happened. And also, we should note Scalise's office saying that that he spoke on the phone with his wife. We know that Senator Jeff Flake said that he wanted to call Scalise's wife, that he actually placed a call to her because he was concerned, it seemed, that she may find out from news reports. The Capitol Hill community here this morning really coming together around its own members. And as for what's happening up here on the Hill right now, it was business as usual this morning, but now, of course, they are shutting down here.
Another congressman on camera right now, Congressman Mo Brooks.
Wrap around, and I ducked behind the blue wrap. And then it occurred to me that what he could do is, if he got around that third base dugout and made his way towards home plate, myself and 2 or 3 other congressmen, I forget who was with me, it might have been Senator Flake or Senator Rand Paul, head first in the dirt trying to seek protection behind a blue plastic tarp, that we were easily the next targets. And as it turned out, it was a wise decision for us to, when we thought we had no choice, we ran and jumped into the first base dugout, which is about 2 feet below ground level, so it's got some protection. Because as I understand it, the shooter was actually shot behind home plate, where all of us, 2 or 3 or 4 of us, however many there were on the ground there, we would have been his next victims.
Do you know who the shooter was shot by?
It was one of our 2 Capitol Police officers who engaged the shooter while they were wounded.
How long did it take him to engage him?
It seemed like a long time. It seemed like 60 to 120 seconds, a minute or 2. I was able to hide behind the batting cage, make it to the dugout, take off my belt because one of our staffers was wounded. He was bleeding from his calf. Take off the belt. Myself and another person put the belt as a tourniquet onto his leg. And then we're breathing dugout dust face first down. And then we start hearing gunshots about 5 feet from me. And that's where I see one of our Capitol Police officers shooting from around the corner of the dugout, the first base dugout, towards the third base dugout where the man with the rifle is. And I don't know how long that was. It seemed like forever. But I'm pretty sure it was not more than 60 to 120 seconds. I think our Capitol security, they reacted fairly quickly. There was some time to try to figure out what was going on. Then I'm sure there would have been some more time to figure out where the shooter was, and from where the Capitol Police are stationed, they would have had 2 dugouts, the first and third base dugouts, between themselves and the shooter. So it took them
here. We need to move the media scene. This is going to become a security area. We need to move the media.
It took them some time to...
Did you hear anybody say anything or scream anything?
I did not hear anything from the shooter. I heard Steve Scalise holler something, and I heard people yelling active shooter.
Do you believe...
And when we were in the dugout, there were people who had cell phones screaming into the cell phones for backup.
And it was the Capitol Police officers that got this suspect, that shot the suspect.
I don't think that local police had yet arrived. It was a long time before we heard a siren.
And then at what point did you see that
I think this shooter probably was targeting all of us. Steve Scalise was at second base and was in close proximity to where he could be shot.
At what point did you see Representative Scalise go down, Congressman? Did he go down?
Within the first 2 or 3 shots.
Within the first.
He was probably the first person shot, but I can't say that for sure.
Can you talk about the history? We've been talking with Congressman Mo Brooks. We are being moved for security reasons. We're gonna actually. Well, let's just continue to follow him.
Decades, and it's for charity.
We just heard from Congressman Mo Brooks, another congressman on the scene at that congressional baseball practice this morning where a gunman opened fire shortly after 7 a.m. One congressman and at least 4 others injured at that baseball practice. We believe one of those injured was the shooter. He is down. He is in custody. Police are saying this is a stable situation, still an open investigation. Right now, I want to go to Pierre Thomas, our senior justice correspondent. ATF, FBI also called to the scene.
Yes, federal authorities are now fully engaged. We're being told that ATF will do an urgent trace on the firearm involved, that rifle. That will give some further indication perhaps on who bought it, who the shooter may be. That is critically being done. Also, the FBI is assisting Alexandria Police and the Capitol Police, who are the lead on this, again, to do any kind of background information on the shooters. Unclear how much information they have on him just yet. We're being told that the shooter was injured and taken to GW Hospital, so he could be receiving medical treatment, which could slow things down. But again, urgent trace is being done on that rifle, George.
Okay, Pierre Thomas, thanks very much. On the phone now, Congressman Steve Palazzo. Congressman, you were not at the practice this morning. I guess supposed to be there, but you have spoken to members that were?
That's correct. I had a previous engagement on the calendar, so I wasn't going to be at practice this morning. But I have had the opportunity to talk to some of my colleagues, and I just have to say, I mean, we are shocked. The mood is very somber, and there's just, a general state of disbelief that this has actually happened.
Yeah, it's such a scary thing to have happen, and actually so fortunate for the members there. So far, we're hearing that Steve Scalise and others are likely to be okay, but had his security detail not been there, this could have been far worse.
No doubt about it, George. If it wasn't for Steve Scalise not being there, if it wasn't for him being, if he wasn't there, his security detail wouldn't have been there, and there would have been nothing standing between members, staff, innocent bystanders, and this gunman. It could have been a horrific scene, and so I'm just praying to God that the Capitol Police, our heroes, were there today.
Had you all as members of Congress been given any kind of warnings recently for incidents like this, any kind of increased concern, or not really?
No, I haven't seen any security alerts. When we travel and do public events in the district, I mean, it's just become second nature that we try to alert our law enforcement partners in the communities. But you never expect this to happen to you. It's always, it happens to the other guy. But up here, I mean, we're in Washington, D.C. I mean, one of the safest places on earth. And, there's a Capitol Police officer almost on every corner. And you're out in a suburb of Virginia playing baseball at 7:30 in the morning, and a shooter comes up and just starts opening fire. I mean, people never expect that. But I guess you just got to be vigilant, and you got to be aware of your situation. In our jobs that are actually becoming extremely dangerous. We just got to be aware of our surroundings and take precautions to protect our families, our staff, and ourselves.
Well said, Congressman. Thank you for joining us this morning, Congressman Steve Palazzo. And we want to go back to Congressman Mo Brooks there on the scene.
For me to recognize the danger and the precarious position I was in, because I was real close to him, 80, 90 feet away. And if he just shifted his view 20, 30 degrees to the right, then he had a clear shot at us at home plate, and I was the closest to him in that regard. At the same time that the first shots are going on, I heard a scream from Steve Scalise. I don't remember what exactly was said because there was a lot of bedlam. There were people yelling, active shooter, active shooter. There were, I think Steve Scalise was yelling I was hit, or screaming because he got hit with the pain reaction. From there, once I realized that I was in a very bad position,
All the time you want behind the crime scene tape. All the time you want.
I ran around the batting cage, which is a chain link area with a cover. It's might not be chain link, might be some kind of webbing, plastic webbing, and it's got a 4-foot-high blue plastic around it, so at least the shooter can't shoot you anymore or see you.
Sure.
I ran behind that to the first base side, and then lied down, hit the dirt, along with some other congressmen or senators. I don't know who all was next to me, but there were 3 or 4 others. And it occurred to me that if the shooter came around the third base dugout, then he would have us 10 to 15 feet away lying on the ground, an easy shot. And so while he was still shooting, I made the decision that it was probably a smarter thing to do to take a chance of getting shot while running. Ran to the first base dugout, dove in, as did the other people who were with me. Then hit the deck, in the dugout.
Left of the cop car, left of the police
In the
car.
dugout, there are a dozen or so people. Some are on their cell phones screaming that we have an active shooter and that we need assistance. I see that one of our staff members has a bullet hole in his leg and his calf. I take off my belt, and myself and another gentleman, and I don't remember who it was, applies the belt as a tourniquet to his leg to staunch. Now, in fairness, that staffer, he was gutsy. He was saying it wasn't bad at all, but I mean, there was a hole in his leg. So we put on the tourniquet despite his remarks. Laid down on the dugout floor again. Shortly thereafter, just loud explosions. And I look up, and there's a guy with a gun about 5 feet above me shooting. And at first, you don't know if that's the second shooter, but it turned out to be one of our guys shooting back, risking themselves, giving us protection. When I say risking themselves, when you're shooting 90 to 100 feet away, one guy's got a rifle and you've got a pistol, that's not a fair fight. So at this point in time, both of our Capitol Police, the security detail that was there with us, is engaging the shooter and I think trying to pin him down behind the third base dugout. At some point or another, he goes around the third base dugout towards home plate where he's taken down. And if we had stayed behind that batting cage, we'd have been 10 or 15 feet from him, prone on the ground, easy targets. So, but for the grace of God and the aim of those shooters, our Capitol Police officers shooting back, I'd be with Steve Scalise in a hospital someplace, along with some of our other people. If he'd gotten to our dugout, there were another dozen or so of us. Senator Jeff Flake was there. I can't keep track of who all was there. It was kind of bedlam. It could have been really bad. And our two Capitol Police, both were wounded. Again, rifle against a pistol. And they risked themselves and sacrificed themselves in the line of duty protecting us.
Did you hear the gunman say anything?
Do you feel like they were targeting you? I mean, that you have a sense that they came here because you guys were playing?
Well, it was one person.
Right, he.
It's a Republican baseball practice, United States Congressman. I cannot imagine him going there for any other reason than to try to kill as many congressmen as he could.
Congressman, have you been worried about the atmosphere of violence? We've seen Kathy Griffith with the beheaded head of Donald Trump. We've seen Snoop Dogg shoot the president. Does this concern you, this media environment?
We in the United States Congress have always been high-profile targets. The president, of course, is the highest-profile target of the terrorists and the bad guys. But you saw what happened with 9/11. A lot of people in the Washington, D.C. area who help the United States government function, we understand we're high-profile targets. Kathy Giffords drove that home when she was shot and some other people were killed in Arizona. We've had other kinds of threats that occur on a regular basis. I've had my name on the internet with a bounty, if you shoot me and some other congressman. And so we understand the risk. It goes with the job, and you do what you can to try not only to protect yourself, but those who are with you. Typically speaking, congressmen and senators cannot protect themselves that much because normally if there's a shooter, you're the first target. But what you need to do is make sure that you have law enforcement available so that after the gunman has shot you or the senator, depending on who's presiding over the event, that the law enforcement officials who are there can prevent others from having their lives lost, as was the case with Kathy Giffords and I'm sorry, Gabby. My bad. I'm sorry. I'm still a little bit emotional. With Gabby Giffords having been shot in Arizona, where the second, third, and fourth, and fifth shots. Well, there are a lot of them. If we'd had better law enforcement protection, then the casualties probably would have been less. So that's what we need.
You say you're high profile, but
did you see the guy? Did he say anything? Did the man
I never heard
anything?
it. I never heard him say anything. He didn't say anything before he was shot. Before he started shooting, I never heard him say anything. And after the shooting started, what I heard primarily were gunshots, rifle shots and gunshots, and a lot of hollering.
And there were kids. Congressman, you talk about security being high profile. Most people at home don't recognize that you guys don't have a full.
Like here on the East Coast, if you're just joining us on the West Coast, this is our continuing coverage of a shooting that occurred outside of Washington, D.C. shortly after 7 a.m. this morning. That is the scene in Alexandria, Virginia. Right now, a lone shooter approaching the park, Delray Park in Alexandria, Virginia, little over 3 hours ago at the congressional baseball practice. Republicans practicing for their congressional baseball game opened fire, shooting Congressman Steve Scalise, the third-ranking member, Republican member of the House of Representatives. You see him there. He's injured in the hip. We believe his injuries are not life-threatening. 4 others injured, including the gunman. He is now in custody, according to officials. Alexandria police say it is a stable situation now. The gunman in custody. Security has been stepped up at the Capitol and the White House. We know it was a chaotic scene for several minutes. The gunman was able to fire at least 50 rounds before he was taken down by Capitol Police. The security detail for Congressman Scalise. Our David Curley on the scene in Alexandria right now.
Good morning, George. As you can see behind me, there is still a very heavy police presence here. We have seen some of the fire vehicles leave and others, but if you look down behind me here and you see where those police cars are, to the left is the park, and you've undoubtedly seen some of the video closer up, but as you can tell, police have moved us several blocks away. The incident now under control, according to Alexandria Police. 5 people taken to the hospital. That includes the shooter, as you mentioned, George, Congressman Steve Scalise. Then we understand a staffer or a lobbyist, and then potentially 1 or 2 of the security detail that were with the congressman and returned fire. Now, I was able to talk just a few minutes ago to Owen Britton, who was in the YMCA, which is right next to the park. He was walking out at about 7:05, and somebody said shots are being fired. He went ahead and went outside and looked outside and actually saw the man. Here's part of what, do we have the sound? This is part of what he told me just moments ago of what it was like here at 7 o'clock this morning. Okay, apparently we don't have the soundbite. But what he explained was he came out, he saw the man with a gun. He described it as a Kalashnikov-type rifle. We've heard a semi-automatic rifle was in the hand of this gunman, who was finally taken down apparently by those 2 congressional security officers, Capitol Police. And then the man was taken down, apparently in custody and in surgery as well. We expect to hear from police in about another half hour, George, with additional details. He says this is a closed incident. The investigation continues, but as you can see, blocks are still cordoned off here. And about 45 minutes ago, we had police helicopters overhead. It has substantially calmed down now as they continue to investigate and learn more about who this man was and why he was here, George.
Okay, David Curley, thanks so much. I want to go to our senior justice correspondent, Pierre Thomas, for more on this as well. Every indication right now, a lone gunman, no connection as far as we know right now to terrorism.
That's right, George. Early in the investigation, they're still trying to get additional information on the shooter. We have a name, but we're not going to report it just yet until we can get additional confirmation to know precisely who we're dealing with. Our law enforcement sources are telling us that the FBI will assist the local police in trying to get additional background on this shooter. Also, we're being told that ATF has been brought in to do an urgent trace on the rifle to figure out where this gun was purchased. Assault-style rifle, we're being told. And again, our sources are emphasizing that had it not been for that security detail that was with Congressman Scalise, that these people would have been, basically sitting ducks. And authorities are unpacking clearly the security implications of that you would have had potentially a lot of congressmen out there in the open, unprotected, George.
Just a terrifying situation right there. Cecilia Vega at the White House has been on top of this all morning.
George, the White House is monitoring this situation closely, and an indication of that to show you how closely, how seriously they are treating this event. We just got word that the president has canceled a speech that he was going to give later this afternoon at the Labor Department. He was going to leave the grounds of the White House for that and head over there. That is now no longer happening. This comes on the heels of the vice president canceling an event that he was having earlier this morning where he was to talk about home building. That was abruptly canceled. Instead, the vice president came here to the White House where we are told they are both monitoring this situation. At that event where the vice president was supposed to be, there was a moment of silence before it got underway. The word that we have heard directly from President Trump so far comes in the form of a tweet. I will read it to you. He said, quote, Representative Steve Scalise of Louisiana, a true friend and patriot, was badly injured but will fully recover. Our thoughts and prayers are with him. That is the sentiment being echoed not just by the president, but by the First Lady, by the Vice President as well. In the form of Twitter, the First Lady thanked those first responders. George, there has been increased security at the Capitol this morning. Initially, early on, right after this incident began, there was a street closure. The primary street in front of the White House was shut down to tourists this morning. That has since opened up, and if it appears to me that there are tours that have started again back up here at the White House. So in that sense, business as usual, but in no way is this business as usual in Washington today for this White House or anybody on Capitol Hill, George.
Okay, Cecilia, especially not on Capitol Hill. Our Mary Bruce is there in position now as well. And Mary, so far the early business in Congress also canceled for the day?
George, all House votes have been canceled for the day, several hearings postponed, and there's been a tremendous uptick in security here around the Capitol building. We know out front of the building on the east front, they've been clearing out tourists. That's happened just in the last half hour, pushing everyone back, clearing the area while the Capitol building itself is still technically open. Out of an abundance of caution, they are tightening up security everywhere in this area. And reminder, this is already a very secure building. Police presence here, security presence here is always fairly high, and now it is even higher here today in light of this. And we are also seeing just a tremendous outpouring of support here from lawmakers, both sides of the aisle, leadership, rank and file, for those brave Capitol Police that were there on the scene. That was Steve Scalise's personal detail. And George, we can now confirm, we've just learned that all House members have been summoned to meet here for a briefing at 11:15 East Coast time in the Capitol Visitor Center auditorium. All House members will be receiving a briefing on the shooting this morning.
This has sent a shock through the entire Capitol Hill community, Mary. We could hear it in the voices of the members of Congress who were on that field today. As they've told us, they are briefed for how to handle security in their districts, of public events in their districts like town meetings where we've seen such high emotion over the course of this year. They know they're safe generally inside the Capitol when there's so much security, but generally when they're out in Washington, they're relatively anonymous. They live normal lives. This was a real shock.
Absolutely, and it's such a good point because outside of these halls, many members, many rank and file members don't travel with any kind of security. This is their community too. They live here. They were out at a baseball practice this morning. They are, deeply involved in these neighborhoods just as any other residents, and many of them move without any kind of personal security. Now, leadership is a different matter, and that is why we saw the Capitol Police there this morning because of course, Steve Scalise is the Republican whip. He's the third top-ranking Republican in the House, and that is why he had the Capitol Police there with him this morning. Okay, Mary Bruce, thanks very much. We're with Brad Garrett as well, former FBI special agent. And Brad, we've heard now from several eyewitnesses on the scene today, piecing together a picture of what happened. A white male, about 40 years old, maybe early 50s, dark hair, wearing a blue shirt, carrying a rifle, a handgun, opens fire. We also had that one other report from Congressman Ron DeSantis who described a person who certainly sounded like the gunman, or a similar description to the gunman who had come up to these members of Congress earlier in the morning and asked, are those Democrats or Republicans playing out there?
So, George, what you have is a guy that clearly was wanting to target the GOP. Probably not individuals, but just globally the GOP. But one of the more interesting things about this shooting is he had free reign, at least for a minute to 2 minutes, perhaps, with a semi-automatic weapon and didn't kill anybody. The suggestion in my mind may be that he really wasn't going there to kill people. Granted, he has a semi-automatic rifle, but he's shooting apparently to draw attention to himself in particular. Think about how this ends. Apparently, he walks out into the field in at least proximity of 2 wounded Capitol Police officers, I'm going to guess, trying to do suicide by cop. That didn't work. They shot him. He went down. They have him in custody. So there's a lot of pieces to this shooting.
Well, that's why I wanted to stop there as well. I mean, that's what it seemed like at the end. You were making the point earlier on that he didn't seem to be a very good shot, and we now know that Scalise was hit in the hip, another staffer or someone on the scene in the leg. Do you think he might have deliberately been shooting low?
I think he wasn't shooting in any direction. I suspect a lot of those rounds are going to be into the ground and in the proximity above the people that could have been a target. So we're just talking about somebody that grabs a weapon and starts spraying. If this would have been an Islamic extremist, if it had been somebody that had been trained precision shooting in the military or law enforcement, we would have a lot of deceased people that you and I unfortunately would be talking about this morning. So that didn't occur. So that tells me a lot about this shooter, that he's really not a precision shooter. Maybe he doesn't even have that much familiarity with the particular weapon that he was using, but he clearly was going there to make some sort of statement against the GOP.
Okay, Brad Garrett, thanks very much. We want to go back now to Senator Jeff Flake. Senator Jeff Flake of Arizona, who was practicing on the field that day. Here's what he had to say.
Got a belt and put it around the wound and tried to keep it. Joe Barton's boy, 10-year-old boy, was here, and I think he's 10. And we got him in the dugout and put him under the bench. I got to look at the shooter who was just behind the backstop there, just a man with a blue shirt, but he could have fired into the dugout while we were there, so we had to all get down again. And then somebody finally, after about 10 minutes, yelled, "The shooter's down." And so I sprinted out to Steve and put pressure on the wound. He was shot in the left hip.
So the shooter was shot. Did you get a better look at it? Did he see
the shooter, no. The shooter, there was a lot of yelling going on. I could not tell what was, if anything, was the shooter in terms of the yelling.
The shooter wasn't shot.
The shooter was shot.
So, Senator,
I believe he's still living.
Senator, how many members were shot?
One member shot.
Okay, Roger Williams?
We just saw him leaving a stretcher.
Yeah, Roger Williams.
Roger was not shot. A lot of people had some few injuries diving into dugouts and around, so a lot of people scraped up.
And so the 50 shots...
I don't believe there are any deceased at this point. One person works for Tyson Food, I think, comes out here and helps. He was shot in the chest. And he is probably the most critical at this point.
Senator, is your sense
and two of Scalise's security detail were shot.
Capitol Police officers.
Yes.
Is your sense that this shooter knew you guys were out here and targeted you guys purposely?
You would assume so, but it's not clear whether Steve Scalise, the member that was shot, was targeted or not. We just don't know at this point. He was certainly in a bad place.
So he was playing second base?
Yes, he was.
How many players were on the field? I mean, you had
a number. Oh yeah.
How many members were
This is Senator Jeff Flake.
Members here. Probably 25.
Senator, we're just joining us. For those who are just joining us, can you kind of start us from the beginning of exactly what happened from when you were playing and when you first realized there was a problem?
Well, a number of us, I just batted and then just fielded some balls in center field and came in and was standing near Joe Barton watching some of the batting practice. And all of a sudden we heard a shot, a very loud shot that everybody thought it sounded like a gun, and then boom, rapid succession after that. He had a rifle of some type, and it was obviously a large gauge rifle. And there were people in the field. One staffer was shot out in the field, and he ran with a wound to the dugout. A lot of us dove into the dugout and tried to get as many as we could. But then at that point, there was firing behind us from the security detail, the Capitol Police. And I started yelling back, "Are you friendly? Are you friendly?" Making sure that was our guy, because we didn't know if there were other shooters that had us surrounded and would come into the dugout. So we didn't know whether to run or not. But as soon as we found out we had a friendly behind us, then we stayed and tried to keep down. I poked my head up at one point and saw the shooter behind the backstop, or behind the fence, but he still had a line of fire into the dugout.
Firing through the fence?
Well, he was firing around, but he still could have fired into the dugout. That's why he kept everybody down. Joe Barton's boy was here, 10-year-old, just shagging balls, and we got him into the dugout and stuffed him under the bench.
Senator Jeff Flake describing the scene there in Alexandria, Virginia this morning when a gunman opened fire on a congressional baseball practice. The Republican team practicing this morning. 5 people have been injured. One of them, the shooter, Congressman Steve Scalise, the number 3 ranking member of the House, injured as well. Injury not believed to be life-threatening, shot in the hip. We see him right there. It was his security detail that was able to take down the shooter. I want to go back to David Curley on the scene now in Alexandria with more from the scene.
George, as you told us all earlier, the two senators who were, including Senator Flake, who we just heard from, could see this shooter or knew the shooter was coming and shooting from the dugout on the third base side. Well, there were others who could actually see that as well. And the park, which is down here to the left of where these police cars are, there is a YMCA right next door. And Owen Britton, who's a defense contractor and lives in this neighborhood and was in for his morning workout at 7:05, he's walking out and somebody says there is a shooter out there. And he explained to us what he saw and how he felt when he saw that shooter.
I was leaving, it was maybe 5 after, 10 after 7. I was on my way out of the gym. And as I got to the door, someone told me not to go outside. There was a man with a gun. I looked out the front doors and there was a man with a gun. He was crouched behind a wooden structure. He was carrying what looked like a Kalashnikov type assault rifle, a curved magazine, and exchanging fire with police officers. What I now know are police officers who were crouched behind a black SUV.
You walk out, you have an indication that there may be a shooter. You see the shooter, you see a gun battle. What do you do? What are you thinking?
Get away from the windows is what I was thinking. And that's what I told everyone who was in the lobby area of the gym. Tried to get them to not stand next to the windows, not stand next to the front doors. That turned out to be a good idea. A few moments later during the exchange, 2 bullets hit the front of the gym. One came through a set of windows and the other lodged in the windows.
So this touched where you were?
Yeah, it was rather personal.
What do you make of all this? I mean, here are members of Congress. You've learned now what actually happened there at the scene. As an American who has been touched by this, what do you make of it?
Well, I think it speaks a deep message about the depth of the division in our nation right now between the political extremes. Obviously, we don't know this person or what their motivations were. Apparently, they were asking who was playing on the field, got an answer, and then launched into action. So we got to assume a political motivation, and it's deeply troubling. I think we should all come together as a nation.
Were you scared?
You know, at the time, no, not particularly. I entered a sort of pragmatic frame of mind. I suppose that's a manifestation of fear of sorts, but I wouldn't describe myself as being afraid at the time.
And now you're getting ready to walk away from this scene. What are your thoughts?
Now I'm afraid. It's unsettling to have violence touch so close to one's daily routine. This is something I do every other day, so it's concerning.
You know, it's something I've heard from a couple of witnesses here. They're really disturbed by the fact of a shooting like this, highlighting what they say are the divisions within the country. George, as you mentioned, there's been one report of one member of Congress saying the shooter asked were these Republicans or Democrats. I've had a couple of witnesses tell me here on the scene that they see this as a symptom of what's happening in their country, and they're very saddened by it, George.
Sad and shock we're hearing in the voices this morning. David Curley, thanks very much. I want to go back to Pierre Thomas, our senior justice correspondent. As well, you said earlier, Pierre, that you had a name not confirmed yet. We also know ATF doing everything they can to trace down that rifle.
You have a massive crime scene, and the key thing is once you get the witnesses and the victims to safety, you begin to unpack what you can find out about the shooter. The weapon is a source of information. Potentially, ATF is doing an urgent search on the firearm described as an assault-style rifle. The FBI, now with a name, we believe, will begin to unpack this man's background, find out everything they can about him, who he's been talking to, what he's been viewing online. That will be critical in the early stages of this investigation, because finding out the motive is critical, because you obviously want to understand if there's some kind of threat beyond this lone shooter. Right now, again, authorities say there appears to be no nexus to terrorism. My sources are saying it's still very early. No final determinations have been made. And they also want to make sure that there's not a network of support for this person who did the shooting, George.
We're expecting to hear from Virginia Governor Terry McAuliffe at around 10:30, Pierre. I know you're going to continue your reporting as well. Meantime, we want to go to another eyewitness on the scene who lived nearby.
With Noah Nathan, who is a resident, he lives nearby, but also Noah, you were at the dog park when all this unfolded. And just so people know, it's just behind this fence. So we're talking, it's what, 15 yards behind the actual ball field, very close in proximity, right? Tell me what it is you first saw and then what unfolded from there.
Right, well, I was walking in and the Republican, they practice here all the time, so it's a normal thing to see them playing ball here. And just when I was going in the dog park, I heard was the first shot, but I just thought it was some kids with fireworks. And so I went into the first gate of the dog park, and then I heard the second shot and I realized it wasn't fireworks and people were starting to scurry around. So then I just laid flat on the ground and I didn't get a chance to lock the gate behind, so I had to hold on to the dogs. And then after a couple shots came by, I can hear them whizzing by. I heard them hit the fence, heard them skip across the gravel.
You're saying you heard the shots actually hit near you?
Yeah. And then I was just laying flat on the ground, and then there were 2 trash cans in that area, so I just like tried to wiggle over there to get some protection. But there was nothing I can do. I was pretty much just helpless and pretty pissed off that I was helpless. So I got my phone out. It's like, well, at least let me record it. Maybe there'll be some information that can be used. And so I got like 5.5 minutes of video of, I didn't see the shooter, but I saw the police shooting back at the shooter. And the police have my phone, so hopefully they can get something worthwhile from it.
Yeah, talk to me about, you also said you had a view of the ball field at that point, and you're looking in there, and you can see what we assume may have been Congressman Scalise at that point lying down, and the reaction. What happened with him immediately after?
Yeah, so he was laying on the field, and then his buddies were saying, don't move. It was almost like out of a movie with like a sniper saying, don't move or he's going to shoot you again. They were just saying, don't move. And then as soon as all the firing stopped, I'm guessing the whole thing maybe was like 8-9 minutes. So after all the firing stopped, then his buddies ran out to him to try and make sure he was okay. I don't remember how long it took until the ambulance got here, and then they medevaced him out.
The moments that you realize this is not fireworks, this isn't something else, this is definitively a shooting and I'm in danger. You said you also saw them trying to get away from the baseball field. Everyone was seeking shelter at that point. Tell me what the people who were on the field, the ball players, were doing.
Right, they were running, some of them jumping over the fence and trying to get behind the building. At first, I don't think we realized where the shooter was coming from, so you didn't want to like run right into where he was shooting. So as soon, I think they realized that he was from, I don't know if it was like the snack bar or the dugout, so they jumped over the fence and they were able to get away. Some jumped into the dog park. There was about 15 of us in the dog park at the time. I was just flat out, just trying to get as flat as I could. And then, it was nice because you could see the police, the Capitol Police shooting back. And then after all the gunfire stopped, then it was like, okay, it's safe to get up, and then we saw them running out to the congressman.
Talk a little bit more about the Capitol Police, because as you've stated, you see the ball players here, you see the members and their staff playing and practicing all the time here, and you know that there is some level of security by Capitol Police for the members, but it's not, it's pretty subtle. It's not overt, so you're not seeing a bunch of officers in uniform standing around. Yet you said they were really quick to react today. Talk about that.
There's usually like 1 or 2 SUVs in the Capitol in the suits, so they're not playing ball. But yeah, they were really quick. They were able to contain it. But there's kids here. Some of them brought, I don't know, kids or grandkids, I guess, because they're out of school.
You said there was a pregnant woman in the park?
Yeah, there was a pregnant woman in the park. She's like due in a month, so luckily no issues happened there.
Mm-hmm. And now that you've had a few moments to kind of digest this, give me your thoughts. Look, this is it could have been a Little League game. It could have been anything. So it's terrible regardless of who was a target and why, and the fact that people were shot. But now that you've been able to understand some of the reporting, and these were members of Congress and their staff that were out here, and that someone intentionally came out with a rifle and was trying to shoot and kill them, give me your reaction.
It's pissed off. It's like, but there's mental issues. It's a safe neighborhood, family-friendly neighborhood. I'm presuming they came out because he knew the congressman played baseball here in the morning. So I don't know.
Does everyone in this area know that this is where Congress plays?
Yeah, you don't have people come to watch the game, but people go by and realize, oh, that's the congressman, because they're usually here early. Usually here from like 6:15 to like 7:30. So they're not here all day. They're here pretty early. So if you're not up early, you're not going to notice them.
Last thing, talk again about the kind of the heroism of the police officers who were quick to react.
Oh, it was great. It's if they wouldn't have been here, we would have just been sitting ducks.
Noah Nathan, eyewitness on the scene. I'm here with our chief investigative correspondent, Brian Ross, as well. The real search now, motive.
Absolutely, and so far no determination of motive, and there is no threat. They have a threat matrix. There is no known threat at this point. They weren't looking for anything particular, and they don't yet have a motive. They say they're still searching hard and long for that. And we go back to the shooting 6 years ago of Gabby Giffords, where 7 people were killed by a 25-year-old man who was on social media complaining about Congress spending money illegally. He's in prison now, 7 life sentences for killing 7 people. So they would look for the motive here, but as we've heard, they were clearly targeting a group of people, not one particular congressman.
Okay, Brian Ross, I'm also here with Dr. Jen Ashton. We heard some quick action there by the Capitol Police. We also know there was quick action by the Congressman Scalise's colleagues, including a former medic who was able to quickly put a tourniquet on Congressman Scalise. We see him there right now. He's in surgery, expected to survive.
Right, we're hearing a lot about the use of a tourniquet, George. We're not sure if it was actually applied to the congressman or to the person who suffered a gunshot wound to the leg. Typically, tourniquets are used for extremity injuries, and some historical perspective here. In the 80s and 90s, the use of tourniquets in trauma and in the field had actually fallen out of favor. It was thought to do more harm than good. This was something that then evolved into more common practice and came literally from the battlefield, in this case, to the baseball field. And there is now a big push by the American College of Surgeons that was rolled out as recently as last year to really educate the lay public and first responders in the appropriate and safe use of a tourniquet, because it's really known that in mass casualties like this, unfortunately, which we're seeing more and more, the preventable deaths occur because of hemorrhage. So if people in the field can apply a tourniquet, they can save lives until the first responders get there. We saw this used in the Boston Marathon bombing. It was credited for saving many lives there. And then we saw it after the Newtown shooting in Sandy Hook and what's called the Hartford experience. So this is a major campaign amongst trauma surgeons with excessive bleeding in the field to apply direct compression. Anyone can do that. Special types of dressings that can actually help the blood to clot. And then the use of tourniquets in extremity injuries, and we're hearing more and more about it. It's the big medical headline here with gunshot wound to the extremity. Could definitely save lives.
And so far, everything we know, the congressman is going to be okay. Also, the others who were wounded right now. The suspect is also in custody. Apparently, is not life-threatening injuries either. I want to go to Brad Garrett, our former FBI special agent, and we know authorities already are going to be getting all the information they can from that shooter.
Absolutely, George. And I think they probably already have, if he's talking, a picture. These guys tend to talk because this shooting is the most important thing they've probably done in their life. And so they want the attention. He's probably venting about why he did this. He may even be telling them where the weapon came from, etc. So I would say in very short order, at least law enforcement will know what they have.
And generally, you were describing this earlier situation where something could have sparked this in the last 24 hours, almost like a snap situation. That would suggest not something that required a lot of planning?
No, but how much planning do you need, George? You drive to a baseball field, determine it's GOP folks, that's who you're angry at, and you open fire. I mean, it's like car rammings, it's like people jumping out with knives that we unfortunately have to talk about a lot. These don't take any planning. You just have to have a group of people. In this case, he needed a group, apparently, of GOP people, and that they were the target. And just that simple. So, again, I hate to keep repeating this, but these situations are almost completely impossible to defense against unless you know about them.
Right, and the only defense there was the fact that Congressman Scalise is a member of the leadership and had a security detail. Okay, Brad Garrett, thanks very much. I want to go back to Cecilia Vega at the White House. This all occurred before the start of the workday in Washington. Once everyone has learned of the shooting, including there at the White House, everything else is stopped.
Everything stopped here, George. The vice president had an event that was canceled. He was supposed to be speaking to home builders today. That was off campus away from the White House. That was canceled. Instead, the vice president raced over here to the White House where the president is. The president had an event that was supposed to take place later this afternoon. He also was going to leave the White House for that. That has since been canceled. The president has been tweeting about this along with the vice president and the first lady, thanking the first responders, extending their prayers to all those involved, especially Representative Scalise. Security, we saw what appeared to be a beefed up presence, at least initially. The Pennsylvania Avenue right outside the White House was shut down for a short time. That is now open again. But really, this has brought what has been an exceptionally busy week, exceptionally busy few weeks for this president to a complete standstill. And we are waiting to find out. We've not heard whether the president will address this directly on camera today or not. We are waiting to find that out, George.
And Cecilia, President Trump relatively new to Washington, but he did have a relationship with Congressman Scalise.
Yeah, he certainly did. He calls him a friend. He calls him a loyal patriot. And a number of congressional members from the GOP were here yesterday, right here in the White House, meeting about health care. We don't know at this point whether any of those who were in this meeting yesterday were actually at that ballpark there this morning. And let's not forget his relationship with Rand Paul, who was also there, a very contentious one, going back to the campaign. But this is a president who has a touch and go relationship with members of his own party on Capitol Hill, certainly. But for coming from this White House right now, absolutely nothing but concern for what's happening out there, George.
That's right. The scene there in Alexandria, there's Virginia Governor Terry McAuliffe right now about to start a press conference on the scene there in Alexandria. Let's listen in. Hear from
Good morning,
the
everybody.
governor.
I'm Mike Brown, Chief of the Alexandria Police Department. That's BROWN.
Can you come closer to the microphone, please?
Thank you. We're here today to give you an update on the incident that occurred this morning here in Alexandria. Let me repeat, if I can, some of the facts that we do know at this point. Before I start, though, I want to say that this incident is not an active incident. The city is safe. We have an active investigation going on for the incident that took place this morning, but I want to reassure the community here in Alexandria that this city is indeed safe. We will continue to work with the investigation as it moves forward. The facts as we have it this morning, again, at 0709, 9 minutes after 7 o'clock, we received a 911 call of an active shooter at Simpson Park here on Monroe in Alexandria. Our units responded and were on scene within 3 minutes. The officers received fire from a suspect, and they returned fire, and that part of the investigation is ongoing as we speak. We came to find out that at this event was a practice session for a baseball team involving some representatives from Congress or some employees from Congress. There were Capitol Police individuals, a contingent on scene, and they also engaged with the subject, and I'll let the chief of the Capitol Police respond to that. The emergency medical personnel that responded to the scene from the Alexandria Fire Department, as well as officers from the Alexandria Police Department, provided treatment to a number of individuals on scene. Those individuals, we know that 5 of them were transported by public emergency medical sources to hospitals within the area to deal with a variety of injuries and treatment. At this point, the Alexandria Police Department, because this case involves the assault on a federal officer, the Federal Bureau of Investigation will be taking over the investigation, and we welcome our work with the FBI. We are embedded and are assisting the FBI along with other agencies that are trying to deal with this particular scene and this investigation of this incident. That said, I would also like to say our gratitude to the allied agencies that responded to this scene. We had individuals from the Alexandria Sheriff's Department, of course, the Alexandria Fire Department, who initial response helped us a great deal in trying to manage this thing. And quite frankly, I couldn't be more proud of the men and women that were involved from the Alexandria Police Department. They did an outstanding job.
Peter Welch? Which Welch?
Go ahead and introduce Chief Verderosa from the Capitol Police to come up and talk a little bit about their efforts in this area and what they're doing. Chief?
Thank you, Chief. I would like to first start out by thanking the Alexandria Police, Sheriff's Office, Fire Department, the FBI, ATF, and all of our federal law enforcement and local partners who assisted in this response. Certainly, it's a very large response, and it's going to take a while to sort through all of the details. My units of our Dignitary Protection Division were on site with Congressional Protectee when we had when the incident occurred. They did engage in gunfire with the suspect and were assisted by the Alexandria police. The officers, the United States Capitol Police officers who were injured are in good condition and have not suffered any life-threatening injuries at this point. As we get more information, we'll be working through the FBI and our local partners with the Alexandria Police to provide more details as they become available. But at this point, I'd like to turn it over to the FBI.
Good morning, Tim Slater. I'm the SAC, the Special Agent in charge of the Washington Field Office. And I just want to reiterate what the chiefs have said. This is a secure community at this point. It's an active investigation. However, the security of the community is a paramount, and I want to reassure you that that's the case. So we got involved around 9:30 this morning. Initially, we responded with our National Capital Response Squad from the JTTF per our protocol, and they were assisting our state and local partners. Once it was confirmed that we had a member of Congress that was involved in the incident, we have taken the lead. However, this is a joint command, and this is a joint investigation with our state and local partners to include who's been at the microphone already, and our partners from ATF, Alexandria County and Alexandria City, and Capitol Police as well. I will take a couple questions in just a second, but I want to turn it over to the governor for a second for a couple comments.
Thank you. Well, first of all, thoughts and prayers, everybody affected by today's incident. I want to congratulate the effort of the state, local, and federal. We're all here together. Early this morning, state police and VDEM were activated. I want to thank everybody who's involved, but I specifically want to thank all the first responders. I have been told that members of the neighborhood and the community came out to be of assistance. This is truly an extraordinary effort. And I also want to compliment the U.S. Capitol Police for their quick action, and through their heroic efforts and others, they saved a lot of lives today. We do everything we can to keep our communities safe, and I once again want to thank all the law enforcement personnel and first responders who were involved today. Thank you.
Agent Slater, step to the microphones.
What can you tell us about the suspect?
Is it your feeling at this point that this was, by what you see, number one, a deliberate planned attack, and are you investigating this now on the basis it could be an act of terrorism by an individual?
Ma'am, it's too early to say. It's really raw at this moment. We're just at the initial part of the investigation, so it's too early to say. We're working it both ways right now.
When you say you're working it both ways, so is one of the angles you're exploring, investigating, that it could be an act of terrorism?
We're exploring all angles.
And do you have any information? It is said that there may be a tentative ID, even if you can't say specifics. Are you beginning to narrow down on the identity of the shooter?
Yes, we are.
Sir,
was this an assassination attempt, sir? Was this an assassination attempt?
Do you know who he is?
No, it's not an assassination attempt.
Do you know who he is?
We're still working on it.
Sir, are you certain that members of Congress are being targeted?
American? Is he former military?
We'll not confirm that. No, sir.
Are you certain members of Congress were being targeted, though? Was this an intentional attack on them?
Too early to tell if they were targeted or not.
What can you tell us about whether anyone has suffered life-threatening injuries, and can you tell us about the condition?
Don't know. Everybody was transported to the hospital and is receiving medical treatment. Just don't know about the life-threatening or not.
What kind of member of Congress said that the shooter asked, are these Republicans or Democrats? Can you say yet whether you think there is a political motivation in this?
No, not aware of that at all.
Do you have any information on the weapons, sir?
No information on the weapons. No, don't know yet.
So you're saying that this could have been random?
Don't know. Still, it's really early in the investigation. I don't know any of those facts, right? It's too early to say one way or the other.
Can you give us the condition of the suspect? The suspect was taken to the hospital. Do you know his condition and also the general condition of the officers who were shot?
I think the officers are doing better. I'm not sure about the suspect at this time.
Is there any suspect talking to law enforcement?
Say again?
Is there any information on those issues?
No, ma'am. Not at this point.
How important was it that the Capitol Police officers, the security detail, was here with Congressman Scalise in this incident? Can you just give us a sense of the importance of the fact that there were armed officers on the scene when this started?
Members of a dignitary protection, yes, they were here as a protection team.
And the difference it made?
I'm sure it made a significant difference.
Sir, is that suspect talking to you at this point? Is he cooperating? Is he explaining?
Do not know the answer to that.
The security detail, were they Secret Service or Capitol Police? Suspect's house, is there anywhere else this investigation's taking place?
We have secured the scene, and we're getting through the logical investigative steps at this point as far as cars.
You had said you don't think this is an assassination attempt, and yet it would appear that members of Congress were targeted.
No, I did not say that. What I said is that we are not sure at this moment. It's still early on in the investigation, and we're working through it.
Is your suspect a local man, or is he from elsewhere?
Do not know yet.
Don't know even if he's from the region?
No, ma'am.
Can you clarify
among the
Say again?
Do you know if these suspects approached lawmakers in the parking lot and asked whether or not they were Republican or Democratic?
I'm not aware of that, no, ma'am.
Sir, you said earlier that it wasn't an assassination attempt. Can you just clarify for it? Was it?
Okay, I will. If I said that, I misspoke. It's too early in the investigation to say one way or the other.
Can you confirm his appearance? That there's some reports that he had white hair, others that he had dark hair. Can you just tell us what his ID, what he looked like?
No, I'm not aware of what his appearance looks like.
Just the last couple questions.
Legislator, given the fact you've laid out obviously how much you don't know at this point, how much you're investigating,
Right.
how, with all due respect, can you and the chief and the governor say that if you don't know that the community is safe and this area is safe, how can you rule out, sir, that there is not a broader threat situation?
From the early on in the investigation where we are right now, we think we have a really good handle on it. We just want to run out a couple details before we confirm other additional stuff.
So can you
Fair
tell us
enough?
about the weapon and whether there was more than one?
I cannot. No, ma'am.
Could we ask the Capitol Hill Police Chief?
I do not know the kind of weapon.
Could we ask the Capitol Hill Police Chief, sir, can we get an update on your officers who engaged the suspect? We understand that they were wounded in the line of duty. Can you give us an update on how they're doing?
Certainly, yes. They are being treated at a local hospital, and the injuries do not appear to be life-threatening at this point.
Did you say good condition when you listed their condition, sir?
I would categorize from what I've been informed that they're in good condition.
And can you describe what they did, how they engaged the suspect?
Well, we received reports of gunfire through our communications, and then we coordinated with the Alexandria police. So obviously, from the early instance of this incident, it was shots were fired.
But your officers engaged the suspect, yes?
That's my understanding.
Where were your officers at when they started firing on the gunman? Were they in the field?
We're not. This is really too preliminary to go into the details of the investigation. Suffice it to say that our officers acted, I believe, heroically today, and they're in good condition, and we look for a rapid recovery. So, and with that said, I'll turn it back over
One
to.
officer, male, one female. Is that correct?
I'm not going to comment on the names, numbers, until I'm reasonably sure that next of kin are notified.
So. What about the investigation that tells you anything about the motivation here and whether it was political?
We're not going to go into any kind of motivation. Much too preliminary in the
But
investigation.
anything in the indication who he shot, what he was doing? There was some.
Again, it's too early on. When the facts come to light, we'll share what we can share. Thank you.
Can I have one question? Is the fifth person a victim or is the fifth person the shooter?
We're not going to comment on that. Like the chief said, it's significantly early, and so.
The police department
Are
said
there
that
4
the
victims or 5 victims?
person injured was the shooter. Is that correct?
I'm not going to confirm
But
that.
you can confirm that there were 5 people injured.
I'm not going to confirm that either.
Chief, you said that earlier. Is that
Now, there were 5 people transported by public emergency medical personnel to hospitals.
Was the suspect one of them?
I'm not going to comment on that. That's an ongoing investigation issue. But let me comment to the question about the safe community piece. We have several things going on. The police department, after we secured the scene here, did an awful lot of work in the community. We walked the community. We looked for secondary issues. We brought in additional resources and assets so that we could deal with any possible secondary thing. The question that was directed about the investigation, if in fact it reveals something else, then we will certainly respond to that. But right now, every indication in this city is that this is an isolated incident, but the investigation will indeed be long term. And let me also do a thank you to the agencies that assisted us, and as we canvassed the neighborhoods and looked around the community to make sure this was safe, and that would include the Virginia State Police, and the Alexandria Sheriff's Office, and a lot of folks, even in the neighborhood, came out to kind of make sure that we were doing the right thing.
Were there any other minor injuries?
There were 5 people transported by
But any other
5. I won't go into that. Well, I can't speak to the information that the others are reporting, folks.
But any other
5 people were
injuries
transported.
Was anybody treated on
I can't speak to that. I'll refer to the FBI on that information.
The FBI special agent in charge. Not much they can say yet about the suspect. They did confirm that 5 people have been transported to hospitals. We know that, according to the chief of the Capitol Hill Police, his 2 officers are in good condition, according to the police chief. We also know that Congressman Steve Scalise, the number 3 ranking Republican in the House, is in surgery right now, but in stable condition. His injury is not expected to be life-threatening. We've just heard from Congressman Roger Williams in a tweet who confirmed that Zach Barth, who he said is a legislative correspondent in his office, was also shot this morning at the baseball practice, and we believe the shooter has been injured as well. We have on the phone right now Congressman Peter Welch, who is a good friend of Congressman Scalise. Thank you for joining us right now, Congressman Welch. What can you tell us about Congressman Scalise? Have you heard anything new? Congressman Welch? Okay, apparently we lost the congressman right there, but we do have another congressman on tape, Congressman Chuck Fleischman from Tennessee, who spoke with Mary Bruce.
It is a sad day. My personal thoughts and prayers go out to all of those who were severely injured and wounded, and there were several. My injuries are minor, thank God, for the Capitol Police. They were there to guard our whip, Steve Scalise. But for that fact, there would have been much, much more damage. I don't know why. I'm very thankful, prayerfully thankful that I was not shot. I was on that side of the field at the conclusion of practice, walking down the third base side, visiting with my good friend Trent Kelly from Mississippi. We were talking about how well practice had gone that day. And then as I went around, I heard a large single pop, one shot. I didn't know it was a gun at first, so we were standing around. Within moments, there was a barrage of shots being fired. Larry Hardy, who is one of our coaches, we have a lot of volunteer coaches who come out and help both teams, and we hit the ground immediately, and then we realized that we were literally out there. We didn't exactly know where the shots were coming from, but it was loud, it was constant. So I actually ran and jumped in the dugout. That's when I got scuffed up. I'm sorry. That's when I got scuffed up. And when I got in the dugout, we realized the shooter was still active. There was a child in the dugout because children come out and watch us play. The children were secured and we went against the wall in the dugout. Fortunately, the Capitol Police were able to return fire and at least stop the shooter from moving forward because we were like sitting ducks in the dugout.
Were you able to get a look at the shooter?
I was not. I heard it, and I did not see him. Other members actually did see him moving around and took cover. Several, multiple shots, and it seemed like it went on for quite some time because when I got back into the dugout with the members there, I realized one gentleman had been shot in the leg and he was bleeding. I could actually see the bullet hole in his leg. Other members were like me, bloodied up just trying to get there because they just jumped into the dugout. It seemed like it went on for an awful long period of time. Fortunately, there was return fire from the Capitol Police to keep the shooter at bay. Calls went out for help. Virginia police came as backup, and it's my understanding that they subdued the shooter. They subdued it? Was he still alive? I don't know. I don't know.
And who was the Capitol Police present? Were those just Scalise's personal details?
Yes. And that is very normal. Our speaker, the majority leader, and the whip get 24-hour Capitol Police coverage, as do, I believe, the majority leader and their side. And that is something that's been in place for quite some time. This is my 7th year playing on the congressional baseball team, and they are there every day with Whip Scalise. Today, it was so important that they were there, and 2 were injured. My thoughts and prayers and thanks, my sincere thanks go out to them. A lot more members would have been more seriously hurt if they had not been there to return fire.
Do you think that the security needs to change for rank and file members?
Thank you. God bless you.
For rank and file members, given what happened, does it make you rethink just being out in a group at a town hall meeting here?
Well, this is what I said earlier, and I'm still in shock about this because I've never actually been fired upon. I served with some men and women who have actually been in combat before, and I talked with them after the event. Said, what was that like? Let me say this.
Could you speak
baseball
to the cameras as well?
Sure. I'm sorry.
Take a step this way, sir.
Sure.
Thank you, sir.
Baseball is a part of America. It's been a dear part of our country's history. The Congressional Baseball Game has gone on for over 100 years. This is where Republicans and Democrats come together, raise hundreds of thousands of dollars for charity. We practice for a couple of months leading up to the game. This should be a happy and safe time and a very happy and safe place for Americans on a ball field.
Now, you've been practicing for several days in a row.
That's correct.
Did you notice anyone potentially looking or
Never.
suspicious performance?
We have never had an incident like this, and in 7 years, and there are some members who've played 21 years who have never experienced anything like this. Citizens come up often and watch us. They're always very cordial. It's been overwhelmingly nice. This is a horrible aberration, and it makes us fear for our security.
Congressman, did you hear if any of your colleagues were able to? We understand maybe Congressman Jeff Duncan interacted with the shooter before it became clear that it was someone who was intent on doing harm. Do you know anything about what his motivations might be?
I know nothing of the motivations, and I've not spoken with Jeff Duncan. I've talked with a lot of our members who are like me, shook up. They kept us there. They put up yellow tape all around the area and kept us there until they could interview us. Everybody who was there was interviewed for their story for law enforcement. I think both federal and Virginia. But just a horrible, horrible experience. And actually now thinking the magnitude of the shots that were fired and the carnage that were there, I'm still in a state of shock.
Does this make you reconsider the kind of security that you have with you on a daily basis? Does it make you reconsider getting additional security?
Well, I have always felt safe in the district. I represent wonderful people in East Tennessee. I go to festivals. We have a festival right now called Riverbend. There's 60, 70,000 people a night. I've always wanted to be out with the people. That's where I feel the best, actually seeing the common man and women in this country who are great, who make this country great every day. I'm not going to change that. If someone wants to take an act of violence against me, I hope and pray they never do, but we cannot let the bad guys win this thing. We have got to come together as Americans and get this right.
Because the building here is so safe.
Congressman Chuck Fleischman there from Tennessee. You see him still in the practice uniform from this morning's practice. 21 people were there this morning when a gunman opened fire shortly after 7 a.m., injuring 5 people now have been brought to hospitals, including Congressman Steve Scalise, the number 3 Republican in the House. I want to go back to our Capitol Hill correspondent. You saw her right there, Mary Bruce, questioning Congressman Fleischman. We're also starting to hear from other members of Congress, including the Senate Republican leader.
Yeah, George, and so much of the conversation up here in the halls of the Capitol this morning, besides just shock and grief, is this question of security. What should happen next? You heard Congressman Fleischman talking about that, whether they need to consider increasing their security when they're in large groups like this, such as on a baseball diamond, but also this overwhelming sense that congressmen and congresswomen enjoy being able to go out and be members of the community, to talk with their constituents, to be unencumbered in doing so. Now, the other point that everyone we've talked with here underscores is that if it were not for the security that Leader Scalise has, this would be a very different conversation we were having here today. And so the conversation going forward is going to be about how to strike that middle ground. You saw the congressman here actually growing emotional, speaking through choking back tears about how he feels it's important that he have that relationship with the American public, to be able to go out and speak with his constituents without feeling that he's being somehow shielded by a lot of security. But that's the real conversation here going forward, at least. But a lot of shocked members, as you notice, coming back up still in their baseball uniforms, just trying to really understand what they've just gone through, George.
Mary Bruce, thanks very much. I want to go straight to Pierre Thomas, our senior justice correspondent, because we now can identify the shooter.
Yes, George, we're being told that the shooter has been identified as a James T. Hodgkinson of Belleville, Illinois. Law enforcement officials are doing a deep background check on this man, again, 66 years old as far as we know, and they're investigating some posts that he may have made on Facebook in which he suggested that he may have been anti-Trump. That is being investigated. We're looking for additional details that would perhaps explain why GOP officials may have been targeted, George.
66 years old from Illinois. Brian Ross, our chief investigative correspondent, as well, certainly does reinforce the idea that this was a specific target.
Exactly. On the social media pages, he's talked about his concerns about the Republicans and the health care bill before Congress, as well as statements in which he strongly opposes Donald Trump and all the Republicans in Washington.
Okay, Brian Ross. We're going to talk now to Congressman Peter Welch, close friend of Congressman Scalise. Congressman Welch, thank you for joining us now. I think you're on the phone with us right now. Can you tell us anything more about the Congressman's condition?
Well, I don't. Just what I'm reading. But Steve is a great guy. He and I were junior members of the Energy and Commerce Committee. He was the last on the Republican side. I was the last on the Democratic side. So we sat next to each other. And he's a guy who loves his family. He's got a wife and 2 kids. He loves the LSU Tigers. He loves Cajun cooking, and it's really good. And he loves doing his job. You know, he just relates to people every day in his district. And he's a happy warrior here. He and I don't agree literally on anything, but he wants to help. And in Vermont, when we had Tropical Storm Irene, which was our most devastating natural event since 1937, Steve was on the phone calling me, what can I do to help? And he made a huge difference in getting the emergency relief that Vermont needed. So he's been a good friend, and it's hard not to like Steve Scalise.
We've heard a lot about that this morning, and also, Congressman, we're also getting word just now about the shooter, the identification of the shooter, a man named James T. Hodgkinson, who apparently was specifically targeting Republicans. If you look at his social media, clearly had a lot of anger.
Well, that's pretty horrifying. You know, they're out there playing baseball. Steve is the kind of member of Congress who is just going to wade in and be around the people he represents. It's the joy in his life to be connecting and relating to the people that he represents. And in the sense of the word representative, there's nobody better than Steve. So the whole security issue is going to have to be reviewed, but thank goodness that Steve had his security detail there that was able to respond as quickly as they did, along with the Alexandria police. But, you know, bottom line here, this is a tough environment politically, and we've got a lot of division in Congress, a lot of division in the country. But the baseball game was where there's been this bipartisan effort to raise money and actually do normal things like play baseball. And Steve is, we're all devastated at this happening. But I think all of us don't want really to change the way we relate to the folks that we represent. We just want to be everyday people with them. So the security folks are going to have to decide what changes, if any, need to be made. But already at the Capitol, when I walked across the Capitol today, no people were allowed in the courtyard in front of the Capitol. There was heavy police presence with automatic weapons. So it's already had a real impact today on what's going on around here.
And are you getting any other information from the leadership on what kind of changes might be coming, if any?
We're getting a full briefing at 11:15, a bipartisan briefing on the shooting, and there'll probably be some discussion about security. But I think what you heard from Congressman Fleischman is really the attitude that most of us have. You know, it's horrifying when something like this happens, and thank goodness. You know, there were lots of shots fired there and injuries, but everyone, it looks like, is going to recover. But the violence has just an enormous consequential impact on the state of politics and people's fear and apprehensions. And I think for the members of Congress, we're going to continue, I think, by and large, to go about our business. But I think it's a real scary thing for folks in their own communities whenever there's a really terrorist kind of action like this, whatever the motivation, that undercuts their own sense of safety when they're playing baseball or their kids are playing baseball. So it really has a very challenging impact on the way we live our lives. But Fleischman got it right. Let's not give in to folks who commit these violent acts.
It does hit home. Congressman, thanks very much. I know you have to get to that briefing. Thanks for sharing your thoughts with us this morning. Brian Ross here, our chief investigative correspondent. We are learning a little bit more about the shooter.
Exactly, from his Facebook and social media postings. He appears to have been a big supporter of Bernie Sanders last year during the election. And his most recent post, he calls President Trump a traitor. And he raises questions about the Republicans. He signed a petition against the Republicans' handling of the health care bill. So he seems to have some political activity in his background. He is 66 years old in this town outside St. Louis. He ran a home inspection business which lost its license last year, and that's what we know at this point.
He has been in Alexandria for a little bit. Okay, Brian Ross, thanks very much. Coming up now on 11 o'clock in the east, 8 o'clock in the west coast, and we're continuing coverage of this shooting that unfolded shortly after 7 a.m. this morning in Alexandria, Virginia. Lone gunman, now identified as James T. Hodgkinson, 66, from Illinois, had been living in Alexandria, Virginia, opened up on the practice of the Republican baseball team. Members of Congress shot at least 50 rounds shortly after 7 a.m. He is in custody right now. We know that Congressman Steve Scalise, the number 3 ranking member of the House, along with 4 others, is injured. One of those may be the gunman. We've gotten reports that a congressional staffer, as well as Zach Barth, was also injured. According to his boss, the congressman, he is going to be okay. 2 other Capitol Police, according to the chief of the Capitol Police, are also in good condition right now. It was their fire that brought down the gunman, and according to many witnesses today, likely saved many, many lives. That quick thinking and quick action by the Capitol Hill Security Police, which brought down the gunman, James T. Hodgkinson, shortly after 7 a.m. All of Washington has come to a stop right now. This has shocked the entire Capitol, including the White House. Our Cecilia Vega is there.
And George, we're just getting word that President Trump will address the nation. He will make a statement on this shooting in a little under half an hour's time now here in the diplomatic room at the White House. 144 days into his presidency, and this is the first time that President Trump has had to make a statement to address a large-scale shooting like this on camera here at the White House, something that President Obama, of course, was absolutely no stranger to. He had to address mass shootings here at the White House 18 times over the course of his presidency. We are hearing a little bit more about how the president has been spending his morning since this shooting happened. We are told that he has been on the phone all morning, actually, including with the Speaker of the House, the Senate Majority Leader. President Trump spoke with the wife of Representative Steve Scalise and the chief of the Capitol Police. Now, we're also just finding out from the White House that the vice president, among the people who were at that baseball practice this morning, was a member of the vice president's staff, who is a coach of that GOP team. The vice president also speaking to a number of congressional leaders and representatives. There were 21 members of Congress at that baseball game this morning, George. People might be wondering, how is it possible that someone might have known, a prospective shooter might have known that this practice was taking place? We've heard other members of Congress tell us this is a park. This is a park in a neighborhood in a suburb of Washington on a very lovely morning here. And so there would be a lot of people out and about. But this is also an event that is highly publicized. There have been a number of stories written about exactly where these Congress members practiced this baseball game, at that very park, over the course of years and years past. This is a very high-profile game that they were practicing for. It's to take place tomorrow at Nationals Park. In years past, 15,000 people have attended those baseball games, George, including President Obama in the past. No word yet whether that game goes forward tomorrow, but certainly all eyes from this White House now on the details as they come in from that scene. They are paying very close attention here.
And Cecilia, any reaction at all to this news which came out just moments ago of the identity of the shooter, James T. Hodgkinson, who apparently on his social media had many anti-Trump screeds?
No reaction yet, George, to that, because as you said that those details are just coming in. You know, I can tell you a little bit about security, what we've seen here this morning, shortly after that incident happened at the baseball park, which is, again, just about 7 miles away from the White House here. Security was increased slightly outside of the White House. Pennsylvania Avenue was shut down for a short time, but it is now back to normal now, and it seems, at least in terms of security here, that it is business as usual. No reaction directly from this White House yet, though, on this suspect.
Okay, we will be hearing, as you said, from the president at 11:30. A short while ago, we heard from the 2 Senate leaders, Mitch McConnell, Republican of Kentucky, Chuck Schumer, Democrat of New York.
Mr. President. Majority Leader. I know the entire Senate will join in echoing the sentiments of the President this morning. We're deeply saddened. We're all concerned for those injured. We'll keep them in our prayers, and we'll continue to send them every wish for a quick and full recovery. We're grateful for all those who stepped in to help, those practicing on the field, the first responders, and of course the Capitol Police officers on the scene. We're deeply indebted for their service. We again salute their continuing and unfailing bravery on behalf of the Capitol community. The Congressional Baseball Game is a bipartisan charity event. I know the Senate will embrace that spirit today as we come together in expressing both our concern and our gratitude.
Leader. I join with the Majority Leader in offering our prayers for those who are injured. And I was absolutely shaken by the news of a shooting early this morning at the baseball field in Alexandria, where many of my friends and colleagues were practicing for the annual Congressional Baseball Game, an event that brings us together each year. It's been reported that Representative Scalise, the House Whip, was shot during the attack, as were two brave members of the Capitol Police Force and others, including a staffer. Let us pray that they and any others who are injured are able to recover quickly. This morning is the most sobering a reminder of how thankful we should be for the service of the Capitol Police Force, who put their lives on the line day in, day out for us to be safe. I could not be more grateful that Capitol Police were there at a time to prevent this attack from being any worse than it was. I was with Senator Paul in the gym, who had been there, and he told me had these two Capitol Police officers who were part of Congressman Scalise's detail not been there, it might have been a massacre, because there would have been no one to respond. But their bravery is exemplary of all Capitol Police Force, and we thank them. The entire Senate family sends its thoughts and prayers to those who were wounded, and our gratitude to the police officers and first responders who were at the scene. I yield the floor.
Senator Chuck Schumer. We also heard from Mitch McConnell, the Republican leader of the Senate. We're joined on the phone now by Congressman Pat Meehan of Pennsylvania, who is actually a pitcher on the team. But Congressman, you weren't actually at the practice today?
No, this morning I actually had a breakfast that was a conflict, so I was not. I was there yesterday, but the familiarity with the details of that have been reported and knowing the field and frankly where every player would normally be gives you a sense of location, which is a little unnerving.
What else have you been able to learn?
I don't know that I'm learning much more than everybody else, because the breaking news was right from the scene and I think has been accurately reported. The nature of the practice is we're on an open field every morning at about 6:15. Much like any group of kids would be at a basketball park or a team playing. And the fact that we're a bunch of older guys out there in the morning usually draws some attention. People say, who are those guys? And passerbys, some, it's a routine. They walk their dogs there on a regular basis at the dog park. Others attending the YMCA, which is adjacent to the field. So you're really just like any other group of people out in the middle of a public space.
But as you said, people did know you all like to practice there, that it was a regular thing.
Yeah, there's no doubt that there's a routine. In fact, it might be something that if somebody was looking for a way to see a group, it's sort of uncommon to have 25 or 30 members of Congress collected together, and of course a whole group of younger staffers that come out and help, sometimes serving as the opposing team or helping with the practices. So it's a location where you have a lot of people gathered together, members of Congress, in just in a very public space.
We've now identified the shooter, James T. Hodgkinson. Federal authorities have identified the shooter. Some indication based on his social media profile that he had some strong political views, real anger against President Trump and Republicans. Indications, at least, that this was, a real targeted attack. Your reaction?
Well, I don't know what motivated him. I'm sure more will come out, and maybe he will speak himself about that. Obviously, the hard language and even to some extent vitriol that's taking place in the political discourse today is regrettable. And, you hope that this isn't the kind of extension of that, but you really feel for everyday Americans who are subjected to, the concern of something that is completely unanticipated, and a violent act like this unnerves everybody.
It does unnerve everybody. We're showing there the first picture we have there of the shooter, James T. Hodgkinson. Congressman Meehan, thanks very much for your time this morning. I know you have to go to a briefing back on Capitol Hill. And, we've also learned so far that the 4 injured victims who were on the scene, the 2 Capitol police officers, Congressman Scalise, and the staffer for Congressman Williams, all expected Dr. Jen Ashton to recover right now. There was a lot of quick action here.
Absolutely. And again, it bears repeating, these first responders, even lay public bystanders, absolutely save lives in cases like this. We've been seeing footage again of the congressman, just to point out the medical work that's done in the field. He has oxygen, he has EKG monitors, he has IV access, giving him fluids. He is stabilized in the field in what was at that time a very precarious and unknown whether it was still evolving and dangerous situation. We just did receive a statement from the hospital. This is MedStar Washington Hospital Center, where the congressman was taken. The quote, prior to entering surgery, the whip was in good spirits. He spoke to his wife by phone. He is grateful for the brave actions of the U.S. Capitol Police, first responders, and colleagues. What do we know about MedStar? It's about a 912-bed major teaching hospital. There are residents there. It is a level 1 trauma center. They see about 2,500 traumas a year, including medevac cases.
Acting quickly, Dr. Jen Ashton, thanks very much. I want to go back to Capitol Hill right now. Mary Bruce.
Waiting for a pitch. One came, and I heard a loud noise that I thought was a construction site dropping a very large piece of metal. And then the next thing I heard was, run, he's got a gun. And I took off, went into the dugout, dove in on top of some others, and then eventually dispersed out of there to even safer areas.
And when did you realize, we've heard some of your colleagues say they heard a pop, they heard a loud noise, but it didn't immediately register?
No, it didn't. Again, I thought it was a construction site that dropped a very large piece of metal. And until somebody said, run, he's got a gun, I was in the batter's box.
And just to introduce you to our viewers, we're with Congressman Davis here. Help us understand the response. When did you notice what had happened to some of your colleagues? When did you see that Leader Scalise had been injured?
I saw that Leader Scalise was down in the outfield when I left the dugout and took cover further away from the field. I'm so glad I just heard the news that he's come out of surgery. God, what a blessing. But I saw another former staffer down with another gunshot wound as I left the dugout and again moved further away from the field. But I also saw the bravery of the 2 Capitol police officers that engaged this shooter, that saved the lives of every single person there. With their bravery. They're the true heroes. They're part of Steve Scalise's details. And I know one of them got shot, maybe both of them did. I don't know that yet. But without them there, this would have been a massacre of major proportions of innocent men, women, and children at a park that is very peaceful at 6:30 in the morning when we go out there.
You note without the leadership's security that this would have been a very different situation. Does it make you reconsider the kind of security that you travel with, the kind of security that maybe should be present when there are groups of lawmakers together?
Of course, as we move forward, those are concerns that I probably wouldn't have taken into consideration before, but for the rest of my life, I will.
You're going to change your habits, you think?
It's about being aware and understanding that you never want to be put in that situation again. But let's let this tragedy bring us together as Americans and realize that the political rhetoric and the rhetorical hate speech that we see in the news media and we see it on social media, let's come together as Americans. We agree as Republicans like me and Democrats out here in Washington over almost every issue we deal with just a few feet away from us on the House floor. Let's make sure that we report on those agreements, and let's make sure we talk about where America should come together. We can have policy differences. The reason I'm here today is to say our policy differences matter, but because of what makes America great, we can elect and unelect our leaders. We don't have to resort to violence. And let's come together and make America learn from this tragedy.
Speaking of coming together, that's in many ways what this baseball game is all about.
It really is. I play catcher, and some of the most fun I have is joining with my colleagues who are Democrats and coming up to bat. And that's allowed me to make great friendships with people of all parties out here. And that's what our forefathers designed our country to be, and designed this institution that I serve in to do. And it seems as though the hate just over political differences has ratcheted up to where it becomes entertainment value. And that has to stop. And we need to come together as Republicans and Democrats to make it stop. I was asked earlier if this is America's breaking point on hateful rhetoric. It's my breaking point. I'm going to do everything I can to make it stop.
And we just showed you a photo of the man that's been identified as the shooter. You said you have never seen him before?
I've never seen him before, and I hear reports he's from my home state. It makes me nauseous.
What would you like him to know today from you? What's your message to him?
We are the greatest country in the history of the world. We have freedoms that many on this globe wish they would have. And you took those freedoms and tried to take lives, and you didn't succeed. And there's a warm place in hell for you, too.
Congressman Davis, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you.
George.
Okay, Mary, thanks. Powerful words there from the Congressman. We're getting some word now on the condition of another one of the victims as well. This one comes from Tyson's Foods, who's confirmed that Matt Micah, their director of government relations in Washington, D.C., is among those who was shot in Alexandria. They say he's at a local hospital awaiting word on his condition. And according to, they're saying he has worked for Tyson Foods for more than 6 years. I want to go back to Pierre Thomas, our senior justice correspondent. And now that this shooter has been identified, a real digital trail for investigators to follow.
Absolutely, George. And we're told that the FBI took jurisdiction of the case because a congressman was injured. Now, James T. Hodgkins's son has been identified by our sources as the suspect in this case. We're getting additional information from a source I just talked to about the fact that there were anti-Trump social media posts that they are looking at, trying to glean more information about that. Full court press on his computers that they will soon try to get access to. They'll try to get access to his phone, his social media footprint. Everything will be looked at to see exactly what else we can find out about the suspect, George. And law enforcement officials, again, as we reported, have at least one of his rifles allegedly used in this case. Urgent traces being done on that to get information about when the weapon was purchased and by whom. Law enforcement officials taking this increasingly seriously because of the fact that so many congressmen were at that park, George. Think about this. At least 21 members of Congress at that park practicing today. But for the security of the leader who was there, all of these people could have been killed. And I think what you heard the congressman that Mary Bruce was just speaking to talk about is that they're going to have to reassess when large members of Congress are together, large numbers of Congress are together when the leaders are not present. Do they not deserve security? Should they have security, George? That is a big issue going forward.
It is going to be a big question going forward. No, thank you, Pierre Thomas. I'm here with Brian Ross as well, our chief investigative correspondent. We know that this James Hodgkinson from Illinois, but had been in Alexandria about 2 months.
According to his wife, he'd been there for about 2 months and was expected, according to her, to return home sometime this week. He's politically active, according to his social media. On Facebook just a few days ago, he was critical of Trump. He said Trump and company need to be destroyed because Trump is destroying democracy. We know he's 66. He ran a home inspection business, which seemed to have gone out of business sometime last year.
Know anything yet about any kind of criminal record?
Some brushes with the law over speeding violations, traffic, but nothing serious, as best we can tell right now.
Okay, that is what we know right now. I want to go back to Cecilia Vega at the White House right now. Cecilia, we're expected to hear from the president around 11:30.
Yeah, George, just a few minutes from now, a little over 10 minutes, we're expected to hear from him. He will be speaking right here at the White House. The word that we have received so far from the president has come in the form of a tweet where he says that Representative Scalise will be recovering and extended his prayers. Our thoughts and prayers, you can see it right there, are with him. He called the representative a true friend and a patriot. The vice president has also tweeted. But, you know, George, as we're going through these images over the course of this morning, it's just I can't help but think about what the course of this day and this week has been like and would have been like here at this White House. This is an exceptionally busy time. This is a White House under target right now for a number of questions. As we all know myriad questions about their involvement with Russia that falls on the heels of Jeff Sessions' testimony testimony on Capitol Hill yesterday and Comey's testimony there a week earlier. And this incident has brought this city and this White House to a standstill right now as we await the president's address, his first address, 144 days in office, the first time we will hear this president make an on-camera statement here at the White House directly related to a shooting in this country. This is something that President Obama was absolutely no stranger to. He did 18 times over the course of his presidency. He had to make that address, and it was something that very much pained him on a personal level. We saw him brought to tears on different occasions here in the White House addressing some of these shootings. So the White House is monitoring this closely. The president has been on the phone with congressional leadership over the course of the morning, even with Scalise's wife. The same for the vice president. And as I told you not too long ago, we also recently learned that a member of the vice president's staff, George, was among those who were at that ballpark today. The coach for that GOP baseball team is a member of the vice president's staff.
Okay, Cecilia Vega, thanks very much. We're also going to talk now to a congressman who was there this morning as well, Congressman Tom Rooney of Florida. And Congressman, I understand you left just minutes before the shooting?
Yeah, I got in my car at 7:05. I know that because I had to get my kids to school, so I knew how much time I had to get home. And then I heard a police report that at 7:09, 4 minutes later, these shots happened. So, you know, I was on the field. I played first, and Scalise played second, and we were just working on double plays. So I know he was out in the field, and so I mean, it was just I don't know, you know, blind luck that I, you know, decided to leave early that day to take my kids to school, and you know, I know where this guy was standing because you know, there's a parking lot. If you have an overhead, there's a parking lot along the third base line. And there's about 50 feet of fence in between a bullpen net and the batting cage where you could probably walk about 10 feet to walk up to that chain link fence over grass. And then it's probably another 10 feet to the third base. So, you know, I don't know if he knew who Steve was or whatever, but Steve being on second would have been directly in front of him. Although Ron DeSantis is our third baseman who was out there, would have been much closer. But it's just, you know, I think we're all in shock right now.
Everyone is in shock right now. There's no question. The suspect has been identified as James T. Hodgkinson of Illinois. Apparently was targeting, some indications that he was actually targeting Republicans, Congressman.
Well, I mean, I'm still in my baseball clothes right now, George, because I just haven't changed. And my shirt says Republicans on it, and it's like one of those, you know, baseball undershirts with the long sleeves that a lot of us wear to practice. So, you know, we're out there for about 6 weeks every year before this game, and we've been at that field for about 6 years. So it's no secret who we are or what we're doing there. And, you know, I don't think that it would be hard to discern that we were Republicans, and you know, Steve's security details there's really only one way in and out of that field, and that's right next to first base is the gate. And we have to walk by that security detail every time we go in and out of the field, so they know who we are, and you know, so, you know, thank God they were there, because, you know, there's really no way to get out of there other than through that gate unless you jump the fence, and a lot of us are older, and that would be difficult. So you're really sitting ducks out there if this guy wanted to do a lot worse, if Steve's detail wasn't there to stop it when they did.
Thank goodness for that. You're right. Congressman Rooney, thanks very much for your time this morning. I want to go back to David Curley, who's on the scene there in Alexandria.
George, the FBI has taken over this investigation. 24 ATF agents are on the scene. And according to Pierre Thomas and our Justice Unit, they are tracing 2 weapons at this point, a long gun and a pistol. So the investigation continues behind us about a block where that block up the road here where that park is, still cordoned off, still a very secure area. And I have with me David Woodruff, who used to be a staffer at on the Hill. You were out for a jog this morning. You heard the shots. What did you think? What did you do?
I certainly did. So I was about a mile and a half into my run, running right past Simpson Field here in Alexandria, when off my left-hand side I heard 12 or 14 gunshots in rapid succession, one right after another. I took 5 or 6 more steps and then heard about 4 more shots and heard a window break right next to me. At that point I recognized it was gunfire. I recognized